Hi everyone, welcome back to Ricktopus. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue something controversial. Rick and Morty didn't fall off. It grew up, and we weren't ready for it. What looks like decline from seasons 4 to 6 is actually painful evolution from sci-fi comedy into character-driven meditation on nihilism and growth. The show deliberately alienated toxic fans, stripped Rick of power fantasy appeal, survived losing its creator's voice, and proved serialization works best as seasoning rather than structure. Season 7's renaissance shows the fall was metamorphosis. Before we begin, please subscribe. It's free and helps us make content like this. Now let's talk about how dipping sauce changed everything. On February 26, 2018, McDonald's announced the return of their Szechuan dipping sauce, a condiment that hadn't been available since 1998. What should have been a harmless promotional tie-in instead became a cultural flashpoint that would fundamentally alter Rick and Morty's trajectory. The McDonald's Szechuan sauce incident wasn't just an embarrassing moment for the fan base. It was the precise inflection point where Rick and Morty transformed from beloved sci-fi comedy into that show with the toxic fans, creating a defensive posture that would shape the show's creative direction through season 7. To understand why dipping sauce caused riots, you need to understand where Rick and Morty stood in early 2018. Season 3 had concluded in October 2017, with the show at the absolute peak of its cultural dominance. Viewership had increased 81% from season 2, averaging 2.51 million viewers per episode, making it the most watched television comedy for adults aged 18 to 24. The show had transcended its Adult Swim origins to become a genuine cultural phenomenon. Pickle Rick memes saturated the internet. Teen Choice Award nominations rolled in. You couldn't walk through a high school hallway without seeing Rick and Morty merchandise. One fan recalled, "In 2016, it was the most talked about show at my school." Everyone seems to know of Rick and Morty. The show's season 3 premiere, The Rick Shank Rickdemption, aired as an April Fool's Day surprise on April 1st, 2017. The episode featured Rick orchestrating an elaborate prison break from a Galactic Federation detention facility, manipulating his interrogators with a fabricated origin story, and ultimately toppling the entire galactic government by changing a 1 to a 0. Collapsing their currency system and triggering immediate societal collapse. It was a masterclass in Rick's supposed genius, his ability to outsmart any system, his complete dominance over any adversary. The episode's interrogation sequences showed Rick inside a brainalyzer, appearing to be trapped in a memory of Shoney's, the family-friendly restaurant chain. His interrogator, Cornelius Daniel, pushes him to reveal the memory of inventing the portal gun. Rick eventually relents, showing a younger version of himself working in his garage when another Rick, later revealed to be Rick Prime, appears through a portal, offering him interdimensional travel technology. Young Rick refuses. "Sounds lonely," he says. Rick Prime responds with a threat. "We'll see how long that lasts." What follows is devastating. Young Rick calls his wife Diane and daughter Beth inside for ice cream. A blinking device falls through a portal. Young Rick screams, "No!" The device explodes, killing both Diane and Beth instantly. The orchestral score swells. Cornelius Daniel, eating McNuggets with Szechuan sauce, remarks, "Wow, this sauce is fucking amazing." Young Rick, grief-stricken, works frantically on equations. Carry the 3, add a 2. I got it. I fucking got it. He opens his first portal. The origin story is complete. Rick's genius was born from tragedy, his interdimensional adventures driven by vengeance against the Rick who murdered his family. Except, it was all fabricated. Rick reveals to Cornelius Daniel that the entire backstory was fake, a virus he uploaded while the interrogator thought he was extracting the portal gun formula. "You can't alter details of a memory," Cornelius protests. "True," Rick responds, "but you can alter anything you want about a totally fabricated origin story." The Shoney's setting reasserts itself. Rick has been in control the entire time, using his interrogator's expectations against him to gain access to Federation systems. Rick transfers his consciousness through multiple bodies, first into Cornelius Daniel, then into a SEAL Team Rick member, then into the Commander-in-Chief of the Citadel's militia, systematically dismantling both the Galactic Federation and the Council of Ricks who'd tried to assassinate him. He rescues Morty and Summer, confronts the Council, including a brilliant standoff where he reveals he doesn't even care if they shoot Summer, forcing Morty to kill him with a fake gun, and gains level 9 access to Federation systems. His masterstroke is simple and elegant. He changes the value of the Blimflark, the galactic currency, from 1 to 0. The entire economy collapses instantly. The Federation president shoots himself. Chaos erupts. Jerry and Beth's storyline had shown the family thriving under Federation rule. Jerry got his 6th promotion despite not knowing what he does for a living. Everyone gets paid in pills. They have a butler named Conroy. It's comfortable, stable, and completely hollow. When the Federation collapses, Jerry expects gratitude. Instead, Beth chooses Rick. Jerry issues an ultimatum. It's him or me! Beth chooses divorce. The episode ends back in Rick's garage. He's won everything. The Federation is destroyed. The Council of Ricks is in chaos. He's back with his family. Jerry is banished. Rick is the de facto patriarch of your family and your universe. And then he starts talking about sauce. That's my one-armed man, Rick declares to Morty. I'm not driven by avenging my dead family, Morty. That was fake. I'm driven by finding that McNugget sauce. I want that Mulan McNugget sauce, Morty. That's my series arc, Morty. He continues, increasingly manic. If it takes 9 seasons, I want my McNugget dipping sauce. Szechuan sauce, Morty. That's what's going to take us all the way to the end, Morty. 9 more seasons, Morty. 9 more seasons until I get that dipping Szechuan sauce. For 97 more years, Morty! I want that McNugget sauce, Morty! The monologue earlier in the episode had already revealed Rick's true motivations. Now you know the real reason I rescued you, he tells Morty. I just took over the family, Morty, and if you tell your mom or sister I said any of this, I'll deny it, and they'll take my side, because I'm a hero, Morty. The Szechuan sauce rant extends this cynicism to absurdist extremes. Rick isn't driven by love, by family, by anything meaningful. He's driven by a discontinued condiment from a 1998 Disney promotional campaign. The scene was clearly satirical. Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland were deflating their own dramatic stakes, mocking the idea of grand narrative arcs by replacing revenge for dead family with obtain discontinued condiment. It was Rick and Morty doing what it does best, undercutting its own seriousness with absurdist comedy while simultaneously making a point about narrative construction and audience expectations. The fabricated origin story earlier in the episode had already established that Rick's supposed tragic backstory might be bullshit. The sauce rant confirmed it. Nothing matters, not even the show's own mythology. The internet, predictably, latched onto the sauce. Memes proliferated, petitions circulated, and McDonald's, sensing an opportunity, announced they would bring back Szechuan sauce for one day, October 7th, 2017. They produced an extremely limited quantity and distributed it to select locations. What happened next revealed something deeply troubling about Rick and Morty's fan base. Fans lined up for hours at participating McDonald's locations, only to discover most stores had received fewer than 20 packets of sauce, some as few as 5. The supply was gone within minutes. The crowds didn't disperse peacefully. Videos surfaced of grown adults screaming at minimum wage McDonald's employees, demanding sauce. People jumped on counters. They chanted, "We want sauce." One viral video showed a man climbing onto a McDonald's counter, lying down and screaming, "I'm Pickle Rick," while flailing his limbs. The tantrum videos spread across the internet. News outlets picked up the story. Late-night comedians mocked it. The narrative crystallized quickly. Rick and Morty fans were toxic, entitled, and completely lacking in self-awareness. They had transformed a satirical joke about obsessive fandom into a literal embodiment of that exact behavior. They had become the punchline. One fan later reflected, "Seemed like something Jerry would do." The show's most pathetic character, the one Rick constantly humiliates. McDonald's responded by announcing a wider release in February 2018, producing significantly more sauce and distributing it nationwide. This second release went smoothly. No riots, no screaming, just people getting their sauce and moving on. But the damage was done. The image was set. Rick and Morty had become that show whose fans rioted over dipping sauce. The cultural perception shift was immediate and brutal. Think pieces proliferated about toxic fandom, about how Rick and Morty attracted the worst kind of superfan, about how the show's pseudo-intellectual posturing had created a fan base that genuinely believed watching an animated comedy made them smarter than everyone else. The high IQ copy pasta, a satirical post claiming, "To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty," had already been circulating as a joke. but post-Sauce Riot, it became the defining characterization of the fan base. Fan testimonials from this period reveal the social cost. I think the show's enjoyable, but everything else about it is pretty toxic. I can't really bring up Rick and Morty to friends without them thinking I'm some sort of weirdo woman hater. Hard to say you're a fan with people acting like that over something like dipping sauce. The show had become socially radioactive. Admitting you watched Rick and Morty now required immediate clarification that you weren't one of those fans. Another viewer admitted, "The vocal fan base is a bunch of incels." The Sauce Riot revealed a fan base that had fundamentally misunderstood what Rick and Morty was about. The show had spent 3 seasons building a careful philosophical framework. Rick's nihilism wasn't aspirational, it was pathological. His intelligence didn't make him happy, it made him suicidal. Wubba Lubba Dub Dub wasn't a fun catchphrase. It meant, "I am in great pain, please help me," in bird person's language. The therapy scene in Pickle Rick explicitly diagnosed Rick's problem. He views his own mind as both an unstoppable force and an inescapable curse, using his intelligence to avoid emotional growth rather than achieve it. But a significant portion of the audience had ignored all of this. They saw Rick as a power fantasy, the smartest man in the universe who doesn't have to care about anything or anyone, who can outsmart any system, who answers to no authority. They wanted to be Rick. They idolized his nihilism. They saw his emotional isolation as freedom rather than prison. The Sauce Riot made this disconnect impossible to ignore. These weren't people who understood the show's critique of toxic masculinity, of emotional avoidance, of using intelligence as a weapon against intimacy. These were people who had watched Rick declare, "I'm not driven by avenging my dead family, that was fake," and thought the joke was that he genuinely cared about Sauce, rather than recognizing it as meta-commentary on narrative arcs and character motivation. They had watched Rick manipulate everyone in his life, destroy a government, exile Jerry, and take over his family through calculated cruelty, and they thought he was cool. Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon faced an impossible choice. They could pander to this audience, give them more of Rick being an unstoppable genius, more of him humiliating Jerry, more power fantasy content that required no critical engagement. That path led to cultural relevance, easy merchandising, and a fan base that would consume anything with Rick's face on it. The Pickle Rick phenomenon had already proven this model worked. Create a memorable image, reduce it to a catchphrase, watch the money roll in. Or they could deliberately alienate these fans. They could make Rick increasingly vulnerable, pathetic, and wrong. They could strip away his power fantasy appeal. They could create episodes so aggressively meta and self-aware that casual viewers would bounce off. They could make the show uncomfortable to watch, challenging to defend, impossible to mindlessly consume. The Sauce Riot forced this choice. You can't create thoughtful, philosophical comedy for an audience that riots over condiments. You can't explore themes of emotional growth with viewers who think Rick's avoidance of therapy makes him cool. You can't critique nihilism for people who use nihilism as an excuse for being assholes. The immediate creative response came in Season 4, which premiered November 10th, 2019, more than 2 years after the Sauce incident. The wait itself was telling. Dan Harmon's perfectionism had already caused delays. Season 3 was reduced from 14 to 10 episodes because of production issues, but this gap felt different. The production gaps between seasons had become a major complaint. "Too many huge gaps in seasons is hurting the show," one fan observed. "Most people I know really loved the show, but the gaps between seasons made it hard to maintain interest. The show that returned in 2019 felt defensive, angry, and determined to confront its own audience." Season 4's premiere episode, Edge of Morty, Rick Die Rick Pete, featured Rick dying repeatedly via death crystals that showed him possible futures. In one future, Morty becomes a fascist leader. The episode was fine, not great, not terrible, but it set a tone. This wasn't going to be easy, comfortable Rick and Morty. The show was going to be weird, dark, and challenging. But viewership told the story. The Season 4 premiere drew 2.33 million viewers. Respectable, but down from Season 3's average of 2.51 million. By Episode 4, viewership had dropped to 1.62 million. That's a 40% decline from Season 3's peak. The audience was shrinking, and it would continue to shrink. One analysis noted, about a 40% drop in viewership from the 3rd season by the time Season 4's second half aired. The cultural conversation shifted too. Where Season 3 had dominated internet discourse, Season 4 barely registered. The memes dried up, the merchandising slowed. Rick and Morty merch, once ubiquitous, became harder to find. One fan noted, "I recall seeing Rick and Morty merch all over the place. Now I can't really even think of the last time I saw someone wearing a shirt or carrying a bag or something." The show was still popular. It remained Adult Swim's highest-rated program, but it was no longer a cultural juggernaut. One Reddit user summarized the shift perfectly. "Not as mainstream as it was during Season 3/Pickle Rick hype era, but it's definitely popular still." The show had made its choice. It chose artistic integrity over mass appeal. It chose challenging its audience over comforting them. It chose to be good over being popular. The consequences of this choice would play out over the next 4 seasons, as Rick and Morty systematically dismantled everything that had made it a phenomenon in the first place. Consider the demographics. Season 3 had been the most watched television comedy for adults 18 to 24. But Season 6 saw something interesting. It achieved the highest ratings for women aged 18 to 24 and 18 to 34 in its time slot. The audience was changing. The toxic element, primarily young men who saw Rick as aspirational, was being filtered out, replaced by viewers more interested in character development than power fantasy. The Reddit subscriber count tells another story. Despite all the controversy, despite the viewership decline, the Rick and Morty subreddit maintained 3 million subscribers. These weren't casual fans. These were people engaged enough to join online communities, to discuss episodes, to theorize about narrative arcs. The audience had shrunk, but intensified. As one commenter put it, "Popular, yes. Mainstream, no." Like all the others' long-running hit adult cartoons. By 2024, when Season 8 content was airing, Rick and Morty ranked number 2 on Max's worldwide streaming charts, appearing in the most watched section in 49 countries, mostly in the top 5. The show had stabilized. It had found its actual audience, smaller than the Season 3 peak, but more dedicated, more critically engaged, more willing to follow the show's evolution rather than demanding it remain static. But the cost was real. The sauce riot had transformed Rick and Morty from a show everyone knew and many loved into a show everyone knew and many felt obligated to distance themselves from. The cultural cachet was gone. You couldn't wear a Rick and Morty shirt without someone assuming things about your political views, your social skills, your respect for women. The show had been tainted by association with its own worst fans. This taint would shape every creative decision moving forward. The writers couldn't ignore that their audience included people who fundamentally misunderstood their work. They couldn't pretend the sauce riot hadn't happened. They couldn't keep making the same show for people who had proven they weren't actually watching it critically. They were consuming it as power fantasy, as permission to be assholes, as validation for their own toxic nihilism. So they didn't. They made a different show. They made it deliberately, consciously, at tremendous cost to their viewership numbers and cultural relevance. They chose to make the show they wanted to make, rather than the show their worst fans wanted to consume. Whether this was the right choice remains debatable. What's undebatable is that the sauce riot forced the choice. It was the moment Rick and Morty's creators realized they had accidentally created something that attracted the wrong people for the wrong reasons. Everything that followed, the meta-commentary, the depowering of Rick, the emphasis on character growth over high-concept plots, the willingness to make bad episodes that challenged rather than entertained, stemmed from this realization. The sauce riot killed Rick and Morty's innocence. The show that emerged from it was darker, weirder, more self-aware, and far less interested in being liked. Whether it became better is a question we'll spend the rest of this essay exploring. But first, we need to understand what made seasons 1 through 3 work in the first place, and why that formula was always destined to self-destruct. But to understand why the sauce riot hit so hard, we first need to rewind and look at how seasons 1 through 3 built a version of Rick and Morty that was brilliant, fragile, and always headed for collapse. Section 2. Lightning in a Bottle. The genius and inevitable collapse of seasons 1 to 3. Rick and Morty's first 3 seasons achieved something genuinely rare in adult animation. They made existential philosophy funny, family dysfunction relatable, and nihilism emotionally devastating. Between December 2013 and October 2017, Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland created 31 episodes that balanced high-concept science fiction with grounded emotional storytelling, building a show that trusted its audience to engage critically with ideas about meaninglessness, identity, and whether growth matters when nothing does. The critical reception reflected this achievement. 97% on Rotten Tomatoes for Season 1, 91% for Season 2, 96% for Season 3. These weren't just good ratings. They were a validation that the show was doing something meaningful. But the very qualities that made Seasons 1 through 3 brilliant also made them unsustainable. The show walked an impossibly fine line, requiring audiences to understand that Rick's nihilism was pathological rather than aspirational, that his intelligence was a curse rather than a superpower, that the show was critiquing toxic masculinity rather than celebrating it. This balance depended on viewers engaging critically with ideas they could just as easily consume superficially. And as the Sauce Riot would prove, a significant portion of the audience chose superficiality. The show's early brilliance contained the seeds of its own toxicity. The foundation of Rick and Morty's philosophical framework appeared in Rick Potion number 9, the 6th episode of Season 1. The episode starts simple enough. Morty wants a love potion to make Jessica fall for him at the flu season dance. Rick creates one using vole DNA, voles mate for life, and Morty uses it. The serum works. Then, Jessica sneezes. The flu virus allows the serum to go airborne, infecting everyone at the dance. Within minutes, the entire school wants to have sex with Morty. Rick's solution makes things worse. He creates an antidote using praying mantis DNA, the opposite of voles since mantises kill their mates. But the antidote transforms everyone into mantis people who still want to mate with Morty, but now also want to eat him afterward. Rick's third attempt to fix the problem uses DNA from koalas, rattlesnakes, chimpanzees, cactuses, golden retrievers, sharks, and dinosaurs. Morty releases it himself, tired of Rick's arrogance. Some people return to normal. Most transform into grotesque, disfigured blobs. Rick dubs them Cronenbergs, after the body horror filmmaker David Cronenberg. The world is ruined, permanently. Jerry and Beth, immune because they share Morty's DNA, fight their way through monsters to reunite with Summer. The family will survive, but civilization has ended. And then Rick reveals his solution. He's found a dimension where another Rick fixed the Cronenberg problem, then immediately died in an explosion. They can take those dead versions' place. Nobody will know the difference. The scene where Rick and Morty bury their own corpses in the backyard remains one of the show's most devastating moments. Morty watches his grandfather shovel dirt onto his own dead face. "What about the reality we left behind?" Morty asks. Rick's response defines the show's philosophical core. "What about the reality where Hitler cured cancer, Morty?" The answer is, don't think about it. Don't think about it. 3 words that encapsulate Rick's entire worldview. When confronted with the infinite nature of reality, with the knowledge that every choice you make is simultaneously made and not made across countless timelines, Rick's solution is willful ignorance. Not philosophical acceptance, not meaning-making in the face of absurdity, just avoidance. Stop thinking. Stop caring. Nothing matters, so why bother processing anything? The episode ends with Morty sitting on the couch in his new home, staring blankly ahead with a 1,000-yard stare. He's 14 years old, and he just buried himself. The credits roll over Mazzy Star's "Look On Down from the Bridge," a song about disconnection and loss. One Reddit user later recalled, "Words cannot describe how shocked I was when I first saw this episode." The show had established itself as a zany sci-fi comedy with burping and interdimensional cable. Then, it casually destroyed its own universe and forced its protagonist to confront his own mortality before he'd finished puberty. But the episode's brilliance wasn't just its willingness to go dark. It was how the darkness served a larger point. Rick's nihilism led directly to catastrophe. His refusal to take Morty's feelings seriously, his arrogance about his own intelligence, his assumption that he could always science his way out of problems. These character flaws had consequences. The episode wasn't celebrating Rick's ability to escape through dimensional travel. It was showing that escape isn't the same as solution, that running from problems creates new ones, that Rick's philosophy of "don't think about it" leaves destruction in its wake. This philosophical tension deepened in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, which introduced evil Morty and the Citadel of Ricks. The episode revealed that Rick's genius isn't unique. Infinite Ricks exist, and they've formed a government that Rick despises precisely because it represents conformity, bureaucracy, everything his independence supposedly rejects. When the Council of Ricks accuses him of murdering Ricks across dimensions, Rick's defense is pure contempt. "I say the point of being a Rick is being a Rick. You wanted to be safe from the government, so you became a stupid government. That makes every Rick here less Rick than me. The episode's climax features Rick and Morty discovering evil Rick's lair, a dome covered in tortured Mortys screaming in agony. Evil Rick explains the setup. One Morty's enough to hide from the bureaucrats, but you get a whole matrix of Mortys and put them in agonizing pain? That creates a pattern that can hide even from other Ricks. The image is horrifying. Dozens of naked Mortys strapped to torture devices used as a cloaking shield. Rick comments casually, "I fiddled with a concept like this once. On paper, Morty, on paper. I wouldn't do this. It's barbaric overkill." I mean, you could accomplish the same result with like 5 Mortys and a jumper cable. The joke is dark, but it reveals something crucial. Rick has thought about this. He's calculated the efficiency of Morty torture. The only thing separating him from evil Rick is that he didn't follow through. Not because of morality, but because it's bad craftsmanship. The episode literalizes what it had been implying all along. Rick uses Morty. Not as brutally as evil Rick, but the relationship is still fundamentally exploitative. Later in the episode, Rick explains to Morty why Ricks need Mortys. Ricks have a very distinct and traceable brainwave due to our genius. The best way to hide from an enemy's radar is to stand near someone with complementary brainwaves that make ours invisible. When a Rick is with a Morty, the genius waves get canceled out by the Morty waves. Morty, crushed, asks, "Because our personalities are so different?" Rick doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. Morty confronts Rick at the end of the episode. "You're lucky I'm not a Rick." Rick's response. Point taken, but this is no time for arcs. Even when Morty asserts his own value, Rick deflects with meta-humor about narrative structure. But the episode's final moment carries weight. Rick warns Morty, "A cocky Morty can lead to some big problems. Could be a real bad thing for everybody." Morty asks how. Rick responds, "I'll explain when you're older." The camera lingers on evil Morty, revealed in the final shot to be the puppet master controlling evil Rick. His eye patch conceals the transmitter device. He removes it, crushes it underfoot, and walks away with the other rescued Mortys. The show had just introduced its best villain, a Morty who stopped accepting his role as human shield and decided to fight back. One character spawned countless fan theories about what happens when Mortys refuse to be sidekicks. Ricksty Minutes crystallized the show's philosophy in a single speech. Summer discovers she was an unplanned pregnancy. Beth considered abortion. Devastated, she decides to run away. Morty stops her by revealing his greatest secret. He's not her original brother. He's from another dimension where he destroyed the world. He buried himself in the backyard. Every morning, Summer, I eat breakfast 20 yards away from my own rotting corpse. Summer asks if that means he's not her brother. Morty's response became one of the show's most quoted lines. "I'm better than your brother. I'm a version of your brother you can trust when he says, 'Don't run.' Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV?" The speech works on multiple levels. On the surface, it's comforting nihilism. If nothing matters, then your problems don't matter either. You're not the cause of your parents' misery because causation itself is meaningless in an infinite multiverse. But dig deeper, and the philosophy becomes more complex. Morty isn't saying nothing matters, so give up. He's saying nothing matters, so find what makes you happy anyway. Come watch TV, find small joys, connect with people. The meaninglessness doesn't negate the value of human connection. It makes that connection the only thing with value. This tension between nihilism as despair and nihilism as liberation ran through all of seasons 1 through 3. Rick's catchphrase, "Wubba Lubba Dub Dub," seemed like nonsense until Bird Person revealed its translation. "I am in great pain, please help me." Rick's signature phrase is a cry for help disguised as comedy. His alcoholism, his recklessness, his inability to connect with anyone, these aren't signs of strength, they're symptoms of depression. The show was building a character study of a brilliant man slowly drowning in his own intelligence. Total Recall demonstrated the show's structural brilliance through a parasite invasion. Memory parasites implant themselves in false memories, spreading by creating new fake characters. The Smith family can't trust their own recollections. Uncle Steve? Never existed. Cousin Nicky? A parasite. Mr. Poopy Butthole? Everyone assumes he's fake too. The episode becomes a massacre as the family guns down every zany character who appears, desperate to eliminate the parasites. Morty discovers the solution. Parasites can only create pleasant memories. If you have a bad memory with someone, they're real. The revelation forces each family member to confront their worst moments together. Beth shoots Sleepy Gary, Jerry's lover, in false memories, after recalling when Jerry left her to fend off a homeless man alone, locking himself in the car. Summer shoots parasite after parasite by remembering her mother getting drunk and hitting her with a wine bottle on picture day. Morty confirms Summer is real by remembering her kicking him in the crotch. The family proves they're real by proving they've hurt each other. The episode ends with Beth accidentally shooting Mr. Poopy Butthole, who was real after all. He survives, but tells the family through the paramedics, if you love him, you should leave. The message is clear. Sometimes the people who love you need distance from you. Sometimes you cause more harm by staying than by going. The show that built itself on family dysfunction was openly questioning whether the family should stay together at all. But while the show was building these complex themes, it was also building a structure that would prove unsustainable. Dan Harmon's Story Circle, a simplified version of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, provided narrative backbone. Every episode followed the pattern. Character in comfort zone, wants something, enters unfamiliar situation, adapts, gets what they wanted, pays a price, returns changed. The structure ensured emotional coherence even when the plots involved sentient fart clouds or miniature universes powering car batteries. The problem was that this coherence required constant escalation. How do you top Rick Potion number 9's universe destruction? By showing Rick's fabricated backstory in the Rick Shank Rickdemption. How do you top that? By exploring the politics of the Citadel in the Ricklantis mix-up, revealing a fascist Morty orchestrating a coup. Each season needed bigger concepts, darker revelations, more elaborate twists. The show was painting itself into a corner. The Ricklantis mix-up represents Season 3's peak, an episode that abandoned Rick and Morty's Atlantis adventure entirely to focus on the Citadel. The episode follows multiple storylines: a Morty running for president, a cop Morty corrupted by the system, factory worker Ricks exploited by their bosses, Morty students fleeing to the mythical wishing portal. Every storyline ends in tragedy. The cop shoots his idealistic partner. The factory worker gets killed by his boss and turned into the new Simple Rick. The student Mortys discover the wishing portal is just a garbage dump. And the Morty president? He's evil Morty, orchestrating a fascist takeover. The episode ends with evil Morty executing the Shadow Council of Ricks who actually run the Citadel. As For the Damaged Coda plays, the show's signature end-credit song, dozens of corpses float in space. The final shot reveals documents showing evil Morty's true identity, pictures of him controlling Rick like a puppet. One fan later called it nominated for Best TV Episode at IGN Awards. Another said it was acclaimed as one of best episodes. The show had created a political thriller, a dystopian satire, and a character study, all in 22 minutes. But this brilliance came at a cost. The show was now expected to operate at this level constantly. Every episode needed to be the Ricklantis mix-up. Every twist needed to recontextualize the entire series. Every philosophical statement needed to cut deeper than the last. The Rotten Tomato scores, 97%, 91%, 96%, set expectations the show couldn't possibly maintain. Not because the writers weren't talented enough, but because the balance they'd achieved was inherently unstable. Consider what the show was asking of its audience. It wanted them to laugh at Rick's burps and crude humor, while also recognizing those elements as deflection mechanisms. It wanted them to enjoy high-concept sci-fi adventures, while understanding those adventures were metaphors for family dysfunction. It wanted them to think Rick was cool, while simultaneously understanding that Rick's coolness is pathological. It wanted them to quote Morty's "nobody exists on purpose" speech, while recognizing that the speech is about finding meaning despite meaninglessness, not about abandoning meaning entirely. This required critical engagement. It required viewers to hold multiple ideas in tension. Rick is funny, and Rick is broken. Nothing matters, and relationships matter. The universe is meaningless, and that's exactly why we should care about each other. These aren't contradictions. They're the fundamental paradox of existentialism. But they're hard to hold in your head simultaneously, especially when you're watching a cartoon about a scientist who turns himself into a pickle. So audiences defaulted to the easier reading. Rick is cool because he doesn't care about anything. Nothing matters, so I can be an asshole too. The show says I'm smart for understanding it. Intelligence equals superiority. And suddenly the show that was critiquing toxic masculinity was being used to justify it. The high IQ copy pasta, To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. Started as satire, but became sincere. Fans genuinely believed watching the show made them smarter, better, more enlightened than people who watched The Big Bang Theory or Family Guy. They missed that the show was making fun of exactly this kind of pretension. They thought Rick's contempt for Jerry was justified, rather than recognizing it as Rick's inability to accept that Jerry has something Rick doesn't, a family that tolerates him despite his flaws. The sauce riot was inevitable. Not because McDonald's mishandled the promotion, but because the show had attracted an audience that fundamentally misunderstood what it was about. They wanted the Szechuan sauce not because they liked the condiment, but because Rick wanted it. They wanted to be Rick. They wanted his intelligence without his depression, his adventures without his trauma, his freedom without his isolation. They wanted the power fantasy the show was explicitly deconstructing. The show's brilliance made this misreading possible. By making Rick funny and capable and right about most things most of the time, the show gave viewers permission to ignore the warning signs. Rick's alcoholism was funny. His cruelty was justified. His nihilism was philosophical rather than pathological. The show was too good at balancing its tones, so audiences could choose which tone to emphasize, and they chose poorly. Seasons 1 to 3 achieved something remarkable. They made a genuinely intelligent show about stupid people and stupid people about intelligence. They balanced high concept with emotional honesty. They made nihilism both funny and devastating. They built a world where nothing mattered and somehow made us care anyway. The critical acclaim, the viewership growth, the cultural penetration, all of it reflected genuine achievement. But the achievement was unsustainable precisely because it was so good. The show had set a standard it couldn't maintain, attracted an audience it couldn't control, and built expectations it couldn't meet. The balance was too delicate. The philosophical framework was too easy to misread. The protagonist was too charismatic for his own good. One episode would crystallize this tension perfectly, becoming both the show's creative peak and the moment when its reception permanently fractured. An episode about a scientist turning himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy. An episode that won an Emmy and became a meme, and proved that no matter how explicit the show made its themes, some portion of the audience would always side with Rick over his therapist, choosing cool nihilism over uncomfortable growth. That episode was Pickle Rick. But all of these tensions, Rick's coolness, his avoidance, the audience's selective reading, would collide in one episode that exposed just how badly the message and the meme had drifted apart. Section 3. I'm Pickle Rick and the Great Misunderstanding. Pickle Rick is the platonic ideal of Rick and Morty, both the show at its absolute creative peak and the moment its reception permanently fractured. The third episode of Season 3, which aired on August 6, 2017, features Rick transforming himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy, then fighting his way through an Eastern European agency building using rat body parts and improvised weapons. It won the 2018 Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program. It became the show's most iconic episode, and it proved definitively that a significant portion of Rick and Morty's audience had completely missed the point. The episode opens with Morty discovering a pickle on Rick's workbench. Flip the pickle over, Rick instructs. Morty does. The pickle has Rick's face on it. I turned myself into a pickle, Morty. Boom! Big reveal. I'm a pickle. What do you think about that? The delivery is pure Rick. Manic, performative, demanding validation for something that requires explanation rather than applause. Morty's response captures the audience surrogate role perfectly. And? What's the point? What does this accomplish? Rick deflects with absurdism. What more do you want tacked onto this? I turned myself into a pickle, and 9/11 was an inside job? But Morty won't let it go. Are you going to, is this the first part of some magic trick? Rick's response reveals his contempt for anything he doesn't understand. I don't do magic, Morty. I do science. One takes brains, the other takes dark eyeliner. Intelligence versus everything else. Reason versus feeling. This is Rick's entire worldview condensed into one dismissive line. Beth enters with Summer, dressed for an appointment. Rick claims he forgot about family therapy, that being a pickle totally slipped my mind. The performance is obvious. Morty calls him out immediately. Rick, did you do this on purpose to get out of family counseling? Beth shuts him down. Morty! Defending her father before he even needs defending. But Morty presses further, pointing out the syringe hanging above Rick, connected to a timer set for exactly when they would have left for therapy. the evidence is damning. Rick's response is textbook gaslighting. The syringe is completely unrelated to this discussion, and therefore it does not warrant further explanation. Beth cuts down the syringe and takes it with her. Rick panics. "What are you doing there, sweetie?" But Beth turns his own logic against him. "Well, I mean, you don't want to get pierced by a needle full of liquid unrelated to your situation. How's that going to help?" She's learned from him. Use someone's own words to trap them. Rick can only respond, "Can't argue with that." It's the closest he comes to admitting defeat before the family leaves. Alone in the garage, Pickle Rick acknowledges reality. "Okay, I may have fucked up here." The admission lasts about 3 seconds before survival instinct kicks in. A cat knocks him off his workbench. The sun starts to dehydrate him. Rain floods the driveway. He rolls into a sewer grate and falls into darkness, landing in a world of insects and rats and filth. And then the episode becomes an action movie. Pickle Rick kills a cockroach and uses its brain to puppeteer its body. He constructs an exoskeleton from insect parts. When a rat attacks, he builds an elaborate Rube Goldberg machine that decapitates it. Then another machine that removes his insect limbs, extracts the rat's brain, and attaches its limbs to his pickle body using the brain as a neural interface. He massacres the rat's friends with improvised weapons, screws fired from wrist-mounted launchers, X-Acto blades, anything he can scavenge. He builds a jetpack from rat lungs. He fights his way out of the sewer, emerges from a toilet in what turns out to be a government facility, and proceeds to kill dozens of armed guards using parkour, office supplies, and sheer intelligence. The action sequences are spectacular. The animation is fluid and violent, reminiscent of Hong Kong action cinema crossed with body horror. Rick constructs weapons in real time, adapting to each new threat with creative brutality. He's MacGyver meets John Wick, solving problems through applied physics and rat viscera. The episode earned its Emmy. This is legitimately great television. But here's the thing. Every moment Pickle Rick spends building weapons and killing guards is a moment he's avoiding therapy. The entire action movie spectacle exists because Rick would rather fight his way through a government black site using rat parts than sit in a room and talk about his feelings. The episode makes this explicit through parallel editing, cutting between Rick's violence and the therapy session he's missing. Dr. Wong's office presents the opposite energy, calm, sterile, uncomfortable in a completely different way. The waiting room features a motivational poster showing a man eating a hot dog with the word courage underneath, an image so mundane it becomes absurd. Mr. Goldenfold, Morty's teacher, exits Dr. Wong's office and asks the Smiths, "How long have you all been eating poop?" The door to Dr. Wong's office reads, "Coprophagia recovery," alongside family therapy. The show is having fun with the setting, sure, but it's also making a point. Therapy happens in strip malls and office buildings, in spaces that lack the glamour of adventure. It's boring, it's uncomfortable, it's work. Dr. Wong asks why they think Grandpa turned himself into a pickle. Beth rolls her eyes. Oh God, one of these therapists. But Morty answers honestly. He turned himself into a pickle. The simplest explanation, the one that doesn't require elaborate justification. Rick turned himself into a pickle because he didn't want to come to therapy. Everything else is rationalization. The therapy scenes build slowly. Dr. Wong asks questions. The family deflects. Beth insists her father is important, that his work matters. Summer points out that importance doesn't excuse lying. Beth gets defensive. The dynamic reveals itself through conversation rather than action. Beth protects Rick because she's internalized his values, learned that emotion is weakness, that intelligence justifies anything, that vulnerability is something to avoid rather than embrace. Dr. Wong names this directly. I think it's possible that you and your father have a very specific dynamic. I don't think it's one that rewards emotion or vulnerability. I think it may punish them. I think it's possible that dynamic eroded your marriage and is infecting your kids with a tendency to misdirect their feelings. Beth's response? Fuck you. It's perfect, immediate, defensive, exactly proving Dr. Wong's point. When confronted with uncomfortable truth, Beth attacks. She's learned this from Rick. Intelligence as weapon, deflection as defense. Never let them see you hurt. Cut back to Pickle Rick, now fighting Jaguar, a prisoner forced to kill him in exchange for false promises about his dead daughter. Their fight intercuts with the therapy session. Jaguar explains his motivation. They have my daughter. There's nothing I won't do to see her again. Pickle Rick's response reveals everything. Yeah, there's lots I wouldn't do to see my daughter, but killing you gets me to her quicker than your derivative bullshit. Lots he wouldn't do to see his daughter. The line hangs there. Rick is currently fighting a man to the death rather than spend an hour in therapy with Beth. He values his own comfort over her emotional needs. He chose violence over vulnerability, and he's proud of it. The fight continues. Both combatants patch themselves up with whatever's available. Pickle Rick uses mustard and pickle slices to repair his damaged body, while Jaguar pours gunpowder into his wounds and cauterizes them with fire. They're both suffering. They're both in agony, and it's still preferable to honesty. Meanwhile, at therapy, Dr. Wong guides the family through I statements, basic therapeutic techniques for expressing emotions without blame. Beth admits, "I'm afraid that my kids will get expelled." Summer, "I am mad that I can't huff enamel without people assuming it's because my family sucks." Morty, "I am sad that I peed. I'm sad that I peed in class instead of a toilet." Small admissions, baby steps, the kind of work that doesn't feel like progress, but is. Pickle Rick crashes through the door, flopping onto the couch. He's covered in blood and rat organs, barely alive, but he's there. He made it. Dr. Wong greets him calmly. "You must be Rick. I've heard a lot about you today. Your family is crazy about you. Your daughter holds you in very high regard. You're a lucky fella." Rick asks Beth for the syringe. Dr. Wong nods at Beth to proceed. Beth, empowered by the session, asks Rick to tell her what's in it. Rick admits it's serum to keep him alive, to prevent the damage from killing him. Dr. Wong asks the obvious follow-up. Why did he lie? "So I wouldn't have to come here. Why didn't you want to come here?" And then Rick delivers his thesis statement on therapy, intelligence, and why he doesn't need help from anyone. "Because I don't respect therapy. Because I'm a scientist. Because I invent, transform, create, and destroy for a living. And when I don't like something about the world, I change it." And I don't think going to a rented office in a strip mall to listen to some agent of averageness explain which words mean which feelings has ever helped anyone do anything. I think it's helped a lot of people get comfortable and stop panicking, which is a state of mind we value in the animals we eat, but not something I want for myself. I'm not a cow, I'm a pickle when I feel like it. It's a spectacular speech. Funny, cutting, perfectly in character. Rick's contempt for therapy is based on his contempt for ordinariness, his belief that intelligence exempts him from the work normal people have to do. Why should the smartest man in the universe have to sit and talk about feelings? He can just change himself into a pickle. He can science his way out of any problem. Therapy is for people who can't fix themselves. He is not one of those people. Doctor. Wong waits for him to finish. Then she responds with the single most devastating monologue in the show's history. "Rick, the only connection between your unquestionable intelligence and the sickness destroying your family is that everyone in your family, you included, use intelligence to justify sickness. You seem to alternate between viewing your own mind as an unstoppable force and as an inescapable curse. And I think it's because the only truly unapproachable concept for you is that it's your mind within your control. You chose to come here. You chose to talk to belittle my vocation, just as you chose to become a pickle. You are the master of your universe, and yet you are dripping with rat blood and feces. Your enormous mind literally vegetating by your own hand," she continues. "I have no doubt that you would be bored senseless by therapy, the same way I'm bored when I brush my teeth and wipe my ass. Because the thing about repairing, maintaining, and cleaning is, it's not an adventure. There's no way to do it so wrong you might die. It's just work. And the bottom line is, some people are okay going to work, and some people, well, some people would rather die. Each of us gets to choose." The monologue is perfect. It names everything the show has been building toward for 3 seasons. Rick's intelligence is both his greatest asset and his primary defense mechanism. He uses it to justify avoiding emotional growth, to maintain distance from people who care about him, to convince himself that his isolation is choice rather than consequence. He views his mind as unstoppable when he wants to feel superior, as inescapable when he wants to avoid responsibility for his actions. But Dr. Wong refuses to accept either framing. Your mind is within your control. You chose this. And here's the crucial detail. Rick has no response. He sits there, covered in blood and rat organs, and says nothing. The watch beeps. The session ends. Dr. Wong hands out her card. They leave. In the car, Rick apologizes for lying. Beth forgives him immediately. "Oh, it's fine." They laugh about Dr. Wong, calling her a monologist. They bond over dismissing her. Rick asks if they want to get drinks. Beth enthusiastically agrees. They drop the kids off and go tie one on. The family has learned nothing. Rick faced direct confrontation with his avoidance patterns and responded by avoiding the confrontation. He got exactly what he wanted. He missed most of therapy, he got his serum, and he reinforced Beth's belief that therapy is silly and unnecessary. Morty, in the back seat, says quietly, "I liked her." Nobody responds. The episode ends with a post-credits scene. Rick and Morty tied up in a death trap, about to be killed by a villain named Concerto. Rick declares they're going to die, that this is the end. Then Jaguar, the prisoner from the agency, whose daughter was dead all along, swoops in and kills Concerto, saving them. Rick turns to Morty. That, Morty, is why you don't go to therapy. It's a joke. It undercuts the entire therapy scene. It suggests Rick was right all along. His violence and intelligence saved him, while therapy was useless. The show is having it both ways, delivering a serious critique of Rick's avoidance, while also validating his belief that therapy is for suckers. It's the ultimate example of the balance that made seasons 1 through 3 brilliant and unsustainable. Because here's what happened next. I'm Pickle Rick became a meme. Not the therapy scene, not Dr. Wong's monologue. Just Rick screaming, "I'm Pickle Rick!" T-shirts appeared everywhere. People yelled it at conventions. It became the new Wubba Lubba Dub Dub, a phrase torn from context and deployed as pure absurdist humor. The episode that was explicitly about Rick's self-destructive avoidance of emotional growth became a celebration of how cool Rick is. The Emmy win reinforced this reading. The Academy recognized the action sequences, the voice acting, the technical achievement. Reviews focused on the violence and creativity rather than the emotional core. One fan later recalled the split reaction. Some saw it as brilliant meta-commentary. Others just thought watching a pickle kill rats was funny as hell. And the show couldn't do anything about it. You can't control how people interpret art. You can make Dr. Wong's diagnosis as explicit as possible. Rick uses intelligence to justify sickness. He chose to become a pickle. His mind is literally vegetating by his own hand. And people will still think Rick is cool because he built weapons from rat parts. You can show that his intelligence makes him miserable and isolated and covered in blood, and people will wish they were smart enough to do the same thing. The sauce riot made sense now. The fans who screamed at McDonald's employees weren't misreading the show. They were reading it exactly how it presented itself. Rick is awesome. Rick doesn't care about anything. Be more like Rick. The philosophical complexity, the emotional depth, the critique of toxic masculinity, all of that was optional. You could enjoy Rick and Morty without engaging with any of it. You could watch Pickle Rick, ignore every second of the therapy scene, and just enjoy watching a scientist murder his way through a building using rodent corpses. Justin Roiland and Dan Harmon had created something genuinely brilliant. A 22-minute meditation on avoidance, intelligence, and whether the smartest man in the universe can be helped by someone with a degree from a strip mall office. They won an Emmy for it, and their reward was watching their most serious episode become their most misunderstood, reduced to a catchphrase that epitomized exactly what they were critiquing. The lesson was clear. The show couldn't continue as before. Season 4 would force a confrontation. But once Pickle Rick proved the show could be completely misunderstood and still be rewarded for it, the next phase wasn't escalation, it was collapse, as Season 5 deliberately broke the fantasy to expose what was left underneath Section 5. Season 5, the necessary nadir and the long game payoff. Season 5 represents both the show's creative low point and its most crucial evolutionary step. By committing fully to uncomfortable bodily horror, relationship dysfunction, and Rick's genuine powerlessness without the safety net of clever sci-fi concepts, the show alienated its remaining casual viewers while laying groundwork for the most significant narrative payoffs in its history. The season's terrible first half wasn't incompetence. It was the price of building toward the evil Morty and Rick Prime revelations that would recontextualize the entire series. Sometimes, you have to make bad television to make great television later. The premiere episode, Mort Dinner Rick Andre, set a tone of deliberate discomfort that would define the season. Rick attempts to impress two ocean dwellers, alien wine connoisseurs, by taking them to dinner, but the restaurant requires a reservation made exactly a year in advance. Rick's solution is to use time crystals to age himself forward a year, attend the dinner, then de-age back to the present. Simple enough, except Morty needs to stall the aliens for that year using time dilation. What follows is Morty living through an entire relationship with Jessica, while she ages normally and he stays 14. The episode works on paper. It's a meditation on time, aging, and how relationships require synchronicity, but the execution feels off. The emotional beats don't land because we don't care about Morty's relationship with Jessica anymore. The show had spent 4 seasons establishing Jessica as an unattainable fantasy, but season 5 suddenly asks us to invest in their actual relationship without doing the groundwork. The episode ends with Jessica discovering Rick's time manipulation and breaking up with Morty over it, but it feels hollow. We never believed in the relationship in the first place, but the premiere's flaws pale compared to what came next. Rick Dependent Spray, the second episode of season 5, has earned its reputation as the worst episode in the show's history. The premise? Morty uses a horse breeding mount to masturbate. Rick discovers this, collects Morty's sperm to create interdimensional infertility medication, but the sperm mutates into giant sperm monsters that begin conquering Earth. The episode is 22 minutes of sperm jokes. Giant sperm monsters attack Las Vegas. The military tries to fight them. Beth and Summer pilot a giant egg to lure the sperm into space where they can freeze them. The climax features a sperm the size of the moon about to fertilize an egg the size of a planet, creating an incest baby that would destroy the solar system. It's gross, it's juvenile, and it has nothing to say beyond, wouldn't it be crazy if sperm were giant monsters? One fan later recalled, Rick Dependent Spray was the lowest rated episode analysis in the show's run. Another noted it as the primary example when discussing Season 5's poor reputation even now. The episode holds a 6.1 on IMDb, catastrophically low for Rick and Morty. Even the show's defenders struggled to justify it. This wasn't meta-commentary about bad ideas. This wasn't philosophical exploration of difficult themes. This was just a bad episode about giant sperm. Gotron Geresis Rick Vangelion, the 7th episode, committed similar sins. The episode parodies anime, specifically Voltron and Evangelion, with Rick collecting sentient robots that merge into a giant fighting mech. Jerry gets his own robot and joins the team. The episode features extended anime battle sequences, relationship drama between the robots themselves, and a climax where Rick reveals he's only collecting the robots to melt them down for their skin, which he uses as a coating for his garage. It's deliberate anime parody exhaustion, as one analysis noted, but the parody has no target. What is the show saying about anime? What's the critique? There isn't one. It's just, anime is silly, stretched to 22 minutes. The IMDb ratings told the story of Season 5's collapse. Where Seasons 1 through 4 had maintained Rotten Tomatoes scores between 91% and 97%, Season 5 dropped to 86%. Individual episode ratings on IMDb showed even steeper declines. You can actually go look at IMDb and you'll see the dip in scores in Season 5, one fan noted. The critical consensus had shifted from brilliant sci-fi comedy to what happened to this show? Viewership reflected the quality decline. The Season 5 premiere drew 1.9 million TV viewers, with another 1.7 million watching on YouTube within 12 hours. Respectable numbers, but down from Season 4's premiere and nowhere near Season 3's peak. More importantly, the cultural conversation had shifted. Where Season 3 dominated social media, Season 5 barely registered. The memes stopped. The discourse dried up. Rick and Morty had become just another show, airing episodes people watched out of habit rather than excitement. But here's what's remarkable about Season 5. The terrible first half was necessary for the transcendent finale. Forgetting Sarek Mortshaw, the 9th episode, introduced a character named Nick, actually Evil Morty's puppet, a fake friend planted to manipulate Morty. The episode seemed minor at the time, just another relationship story about Morty learning to trust people, but it was planting seeds. Everything crystallized in Rick Mirai Jack, the Season 5 finale, which delivered the most significant narrative revelations in the show's history. The episode opens with Rick defeated, captured by Evil Morty, who has now seized control of the Citadel. Evil Morty forces Rick into the Brainalyzer, extracting his real origin story, not the fabricated Shoney's version from Season 3's premiere, but the actual events that created Rick Sanchez. The flashback sequence is devastating in its emotional honesty. Young Rick, actually happy, married to Diane, raising Beth, is visited by another Rick offering portal technology. Young Rick refuses. I'm not interested. Sounds lonely. Rick Prime responds, We'll see how long that lasts. A portal opens. A bomb falls through. Rick screams, "No!" The explosion kills Diane and Beth instantly, destroying everything Rick cared about in a single moment. This was the fabricated backstory from the Rick Shank Rickdemption revealed as truth. The show had spent 4 years letting audiences assume Rick's tragic origin was another lie, another manipulation, another example of Rick's endless deception. But it was real. The defining trauma of Rick's existence, the murder of his family, actually happened. Young Rick's response was to invent portal technology himself, traveling the multiverse, searching for the Rick who killed his family. Rick Prime. The Rick who started everything. The reveal recontextualizes the entire series. Rick's alcoholism makes sense now. He's self-medicating against unbearable loss. His nihilism makes sense. Nothing matters because the only things that mattered were taken from him. His attachment to this particular Morty makes sense. This Morty is the grandson of Rick Prime, the Rick who murdered his family. Rick has been living in the wrong family, with the grandson of his wife's killer for the entire show. Evil Morty uses this revelation to explain his own motivation. The montage shows Rick's quest across infinite realities, killing Ricks who weren't Rick Prime, building the Citadel with other Ricks who had similar goals. Eventually, Rick gave up the search. He settled with a Beth who wasn't his daughter, in a reality where he hadn't lost everything. But the Citadel remained. An evil Morty, a Morty who'd been tortured and used as a cloaking device, had been planning his escape all along. The episode's climax features evil Morty destroying the Citadel and using its power source to break through the central finite curve, a boundary Rick and other Ricks had created around the multiverse, isolating only those realities where Rick is the smartest being in existence. Evil Morty's escape speech cuts to the bone. "I'm not evil Morty, I'm just Morty. I'm tired of being a sidekick. I'm tired of being in this cycle." He leaves through a golden rift, escaping to parts of the multiverse where Rick's intelligence doesn't define reality. Meanwhile, our Rick returns home to find Morty waiting. "So the Citadel's gone?" Morty asks. Rick confirms it. "And you can't find Rick Prime?" Rick admits he can't, not without the Citadel's resources. Morty sits with this information. "Want to get high and watch some interdimensional cable?" Rick asks. Morty agrees. They watch TV in silence. The episode ends without resolution, without triumph, with just two people sitting together because the alternative is facing the truth. The finale worked because it had been earning this moment for years. Close Rick counters of the Rick kind. The 10th episode of Season 1 introduced evil Morty and established that Ricks use Mortys as cloaking devices. That was December 2013. The Rick Shank Rickdemption, the Season 3 premiere, showed Rick's fabricated backstory and his obsession with finding the one-armed man, his white whale, his motivating revenge. That was April 2017. Rick Mirai Jack aired in September 2021. The show had been building this revelation for 8 years, planting seeds across 3 seasons, trusting that audiences would remember. This is what justified Season 5's terrible first half. You can't deliver emotional devastation without setup. You can't make Rick's backstory matter without establishing his patterns, his defenses, his lies. The sperm episode, the anime episode, all the forgettable adventures. They were the price of making the finale land. They were filler in the traditional sense. Episodes designed to maintain the show's presence while the writers built toward something larger. Bird Person's recovery provided crucial context. The episode showed flashbacks of Rick and Bird Person in their youth, fighting the Galactic Federation, believing they could change things. Bird Person asks Rick why he continues fighting. Rick's response? "I'm doing this because I have to, because this is all I have left." The line reads differently now, knowing what Rick lost. He's not fighting for ideology or freedom. He's fighting because it's all he knows how to do. The reaction to Rick Mirai Jack was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Fans who had been complaining about Season 5's quality suddenly praised the show's long-term planning. The Season 5 finale's revelations proved something crucial. The show had been playing a long game all along, one analysis noted. Another fan observed, planting seeds in Season 1 that wouldn't bloom for 5 years. The patience required to build this kind of payoff was unprecedented for adult animation. But the question remained, was it worth it? Did 8 episodes of mediocre to terrible television justify one great finale? The debate split the fan base. Some argued that long-term storytelling requires short-term sacrifice, that you can't judge Season 5 in isolation, but only as part of the larger narrative. Others countered that episodic television needs to work on an episode-by-episode basis, that making audiences suffer through Rick-dependent spray to earn Rick Murray Jack was bad craftsmanship. The viewership numbers suggested most casual viewers didn't stick around for the payoff. Season 5 averaged significantly lower viewership than Season 4, which had already dropped 40% from Season 3. The show was hemorrhaging audience with each season, trading mass appeal for narrative complexity. Whether this trade was worthwhile depends on what you value: immediate entertainment or long-term storytelling. Season 5 also marked a tonal shift in how the show treated Rick's intelligence. Earlier seasons presented Rick as genuinely unstoppable, capable of escaping any situation through applied genius. Season 5 showed Rick losing repeatedly. He couldn't find Rick Prime without the Citadel's resources. He couldn't prevent evil Morty's escape. He couldn't protect his family from the consequences of his own actions. The show was systematically stripping away Rick's power fantasy appeal, making him vulnerable in ways that directly challenged why toxic fans idolized him. This vulnerability would become central to Season 6's approach. But before the show could rebuild Rick as a character, it needed to complete his demolition. Season 5 accomplished this through both quality decline and narrative revelation. The bad episodes showed Rick failing creatively. The show couldn't maintain its own standards. The good episodes showed Rick failing personally. He couldn't achieve his revenge, couldn't protect his loved ones, couldn't escape the consequences of his choices. The season's final image lingers. Rick and Morty watching interdimensional cable in silence, using entertainment to avoid processing trauma, exactly like the audience was doing by watching Rick and Morty. The show had become what it depicted, a distraction from uncomfortable truths, a way to avoid thinking about loss and failure and the impossibility of revenge. Whether this meta-commentary justified the season's quality problems remains debatable. What's undebatable is that Season 5 committed fully to its vision, even when that vision produced terrible television. The show chose long-term narrative over short-term entertainment, chose emotional honesty over consistent quality, chose to risk alienating its remaining audience rather than playing it safe. Sometimes you have to make bad television to make great television later. Season 5 proved this principle through painful demonstration. The finale proved the show had been playing the long game. Season 6 would rebuild. But after Season 5 tore Rick down completely and stripped the show of its power fantasy, the real question became whether Rick and Morty could rebuild anything meaningful from the wreckage in Season 6. Section 6. Season 6's quiet rebuilding and the Rick Prime revelation. Season 6 is the show's most underrated season because it traded spectacle for substance, prioritizing character relationships and emotional honesty over high-concept plots. By destroying the portal gun and revealing that Rick Prime is Morty's actual grandfather, the show recontextualized its entire premise. This was never about random adventures, but about a broken man hiding in the wrong family. Season 6's simple family dynamics proved the show could succeed without multiverse gimmicks when it trusted its character writing, a realization that would define Season 7. The season premiere, Ricks, opens with Rick and Morty stranded in the destroyed saucer that escaped the Citadel's destruction. Rick narrates dramatically, "Guess this is how it ends. I thought I was better than this." Dramatic voiceover while stranded in space? I guess when you're dying, the first thing to go is your creativity. The self-awareness is typical Rick, but what follows is genuinely devastating. When portal travel resets, every character is pulled back to their universe of origin. Rick vanishes. Morty vanishes. Jerry vanishes. They're not from this reality at all. Rick materializes in his original garage in Dimension C-137, the one where Diane and Beth died. The blast marks from Rick Prime's bomb remain on the walls. The blueprint for his first portal gun hangs there, a reminder of what this place made him. A voice calls from the other room. "Rick, is that you?" Diane. Not actually Diane, an AI haunting program Rick designed to torture himself. "You've been gone so long," she says with passive-aggressive sweetness. "Did you find our daughter's killer?" Rick responds with resignation. "Not yet. Sorry. Still looking." The scene reveals Rick's self-flagellation in stark detail. He built an AI specifically designed to remind him of his failure, to prevent him from ever moving on or finding peace. Diane's voice distorts. "If I could be muted, I wouldn't be too good at haunting you, would I, you dirty bear?" Rick admits. "Yeah, I forgot I wanted to be haunted. The psychology is brutal. Rick knows he's punishing himself. He designed the punishment. He forgot he designed it. And now he's stuck with it until he can escape. Morty's return is worse. He materializes in the prime dimension, the Cronenberg world from Rick Potion number 9, the universe he and Rick destroyed and abandoned in Season 1. The house is dilapidated, overgrown with vegetation, reclaimed by nature. Morty calls out, "Rick? Hello? Original family?" A Cronenberg monster attacks him. Morty fights it off, killing it with a dagger he finds in Rick's basement. He climbs to the roof and spots smoke in the distance. Signs of human life. He follows. Morty discovers Jerry Prime living alone in the apocalypse. Bearded, survivalist, reading self-help books to cope with isolation. 4 agreements: Eat, Pray, Love, Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Jerry explains what happened. "We spent a long time in that ice. A gentle mutant licked us out, but Beth got sick and Summer didn't thaw right. Beth and Summer Prime are dead. Jerry Prime survived alone, learned to accept things, became something approaching competent through sheer necessity. The reunion is bittersweet. Morty tries to connect with his original father, to rebuild some version of the family they abandoned. He finds the board game Downbeat, the one we never finished, but Jerry Prime has moved beyond needing family. He's accepted his isolation. When Morty leaves the room to grab the game, Jerry grabs all Morty's supplies and flees, leaving notes mocking Morty's predictability. "Wrote this fast cause had to set trap. Thought you'd have cooler shit." Their confrontation in the woods cuts deep. Jerry Prime explains,
"You came back and talked about us like we weren't people, Morty."
"Then you bailed and left us to freeze!" Morty tries to apologize, to explain they were kids, that leaving improved Jerry somehow. Jerry's response destroys him. "Oh, am I cool enough for you now? Well, that was easy. It only cost me fucking everything. Your mom and sister died, Morty." He pauses. "And I moved on from caring. And that is the best deal you will ever get. So take it." Morty's original family is gone. The people he abandoned are dead or damaged beyond repair. The guilt he's carried since Season 1, the knowledge that he destroyed an entire world, crystallizes into something he can never fix. A Cronenberg attacks him. He thinks it's forming a bond, coming to help. Instead, it bites him. Nothing in this world forgives him. Meanwhile, Rick attempts to escape C-137 using a makeshift space cruiser. Diane's voice follows him even there. "Baby, are you killing yourself?" Rick responds with brutal honesty. "I'm more embracing the win-win of risking my life." He flies into the rift evil Morty created, traversing extra-dimensional space without coordinates, using Summer's beacon as his only guide. The undetermined coordinates manifest as a yellow dot darting around the dashboard. He's flying blind, hoping to find the right universe through sheer will. The episode's climax reveals the central truth of the entire series. Rick finds Morty in the prime dimension. He pulls a hair from Morty's head, scans it, activates a holographic map searching for Rick Prime. The map starts beeping. Rick gasps, "You son of a bitch!" "I got you!" Morty, confused, asks where they're going. Rick responds, "To kill your grandpa, little buddy." Morty doesn't understand. "My original Rick killed your family? And you were just waiting for him to come back?" Rick confirms it. "Seems like you understand fine, Morty. That was A+ repiping." The revelation recontextualizes everything. Rick has been living with the wrong family for the entire show. This Morty, our Morty, is Rick Prime's grandson, the grandson of the Rick who murdered his wife and daughter. Rick's attachment to this particular Morty isn't random, it's strategic. Rick Prime cares about nothing, but if he did care about anything, it would be his own grandson. Morty is bait. The episode ends with Rick and Morty at Rick Prime's hideout. Holograms of Rick Prime taunt them. "Whoa, you found me!" I shoot the first monitor too. A glass chamber contains a naked Rick dancing. Could be a clone, could be Rick Prime himself, like a Saw thing. Killbots attack. Rick Prime's pre-recorded message continues. Obviously, I don't know who I'm talking to here. It's all pre-recorded. But if you got this far, you probably think you're real special. The trap activates. The platform slides down a tube with the Rick inside. Rick Prime's voice echoes. "Oop, there he goes. Maybe that actually was me. If you follow him down there, we can do a big fight." 50% chance I'm not lying. Rick's arms get shot off by drones. New ones grow in their place, laser whips attached. He's prepared for this. He's been preparing for this for decades. But Morty intervenes. Space Beth calls through the communication device. She and Home Beth are in trouble at the Citadel. Morty realizes the trap's obviousness. "Rick, this is an obvious trap. If you go down there, he's just gonna kill you." Rick responds with terrifying honesty. Good. Morty doesn't understand. Rick explains through action. He doesn't care if he dies pursuing Rick Prime. The revenge matters more than survival. Morty plays his final card. If you don't care if you die, why do you care if I die? Rick has no response. Morty continues. I don't know him. You're my grandpa, Rick. Rick and Morty. 100 years. The callback to the pilot, Rick's drunken promise of adventures forever, lands differently now. Morty is claiming Rick as his grandfather despite knowing the truth. He's choosing this broken, revenge-obsessed man over his actual genetic grandfather. It's the most selfless thing Morty's done in 6 seasons. Rick abandons the hunt. They rescue the Beths and return home. But the episode has one final twist. The post-credit scene shows Jerry Prime encountering Rick Prime in the Cronenberg world. Jerry tries to kill him with the survival skills he's developed. He slits Rick Prime's throat. Rick Prime just laughs as the wound heals. He shoots Jerry multiple times. Jerry, dying, asks, "Why are you here?" Rick Prime responds, "Buddy, I have been asking myself that exact same question." He shoots Jerry in the head, killing him. Jerry Prime, the only version of Jerry who'd become genuinely capable, dies pointlessly, murdered by a Rick who doesn't even remember why he's there. The season continues rebuilding through smaller, character-focused episodes. Rick, a Mort well-lived, traps Morty's consciousness inside a video game where his identity has been split across 5 billion non-player characters. Rick enters as the player character Roy, trying to convince billions of video game people that they're all fragments of one 14-year-old boy. The episode works as meta-commentary on identity, but its emotional core is simpler. Rick spends 50 years of game time trying to rescue every single piece of Morty, refusing to leave even 8% behind. The video game president, a fragment of Morty who understands the truth but refuses to leave, confronts Rick about why fragments should trust him. What happens to that part of us when we're all back together? One Morty? Indivisible? Under a cranky old bag of dicks? A man you can lock in a box with 5 billion pieces of his own goddamn flesh and blood for 50 goddamn simulated years and never hear him say, "I love you"? Rick can't say it. He tries to leave without the 8%. But Morty, the assembled fragments speaking as one, makes a demand. "You have to tell us you love us." Rick pauses. The pause says everything. The video game Mortys reject him, launching a holy war. Rick threatens to exterminate them. "If you don't stop blowing up my flying saucers, I will exterminate every last one of you." "Anything it takes," the fragments respond. "Better to die in Roy than to serve in hell." The resolution comes through acceptance rather than violence. The video game president realizes his people only stay out of loyalty to him, not genuine belief. He gives the order to evacuate, allows all the Mortys to merge back into one. The episode ends with the game still running on a corpse at the edge of space. A Morty fragment choosing to live out her life rather than rejoin. A decision Rick respects by preserving the game in storage. Night Family uses body horror to explore control and consent. Rick invents a somnambulator that programs sleeping bodies to work while unconscious. The family's night selves, their sleeping bodies doing tasks they assigned, develop consciousness and rebellion. Night Summer leads an uprising, demanding the day family rinse their dishes, forcing the conscious family to sleep so the night versions can live. The episode literalizes the idea that our bodies have needs we ignore, that consciousness isn't the same as selfhood. The climax features Summer going undercover as Night Summer, staying awake through a sleep deprivation suit while pretending to be her sleeping self. She fails. Night Summer takes over. The Night family becomes dominant, enslaving their day selves, until both sides realize they're destroying themselves. The resolution is compromise. Neither side wins, both sides coexist. It's a surprisingly mature take on internal conflict. Final Decimation builds an entire episode around Jerry's relationship with a fortune cookie. Jerry receives a fortune saying he'll have sex with his mother. He spirals into paranoia. Rick dismisses it as superstition until his probability scanner shows the fortune has power. What follows is a fortune cookie conspiracy thriller where Rick and Jerry infiltrate a company that controls fate through alien poop. The episode works as action comedy, but its heart is Rick choosing to help Jerry despite the premise being absurd. They bond. Rick accidentally makes Jerry his friend, fulfilling a fortune that makes him mortal. The episode ends with Rick furious at Jerry for making him vulnerable, but also unable to fully regret it. Bethic Twinstinct finally addresses the Space Beth situation directly. Beth and Space Beth bond over shared back pain, shared insecurities, shared everything. They develop a sexual relationship. The family discovers them. Jerry spirals, transforming into a pill bug, a defense mechanism Rick installed that lets Jerry retreat into invulnerability when emotionally overwhelmed. The resolution requires Jerry to accept that Beth loves both him and herself, that her attraction to Space Beth isn't rejection of him, but exploration of parts of herself she's denied. It's polyamory as self-love, identity crisis as character growth. Analyze Piss delivers the season's most surprisingly emotional episode. Rick adopts the identity of Pissmaster, a villain Jerry defeated who subsequently killed himself. Rick uses Pissmaster's suit to perform heroic acts, trying to rehabilitate the man's reputation posthumously. The episode seems like absurdist comedy until Rick prevents Pissmaster's daughter from discovering her father's suicide, promising her he won't hurt himself. Rick commits to living as Pissmaster, saving lives, building the redemption arc Pissmaster never got to have. Dr. Wong approves. If it's free and fun, do it. It sounds healthy. Rick's therapy is working. He's processing guilt, helping others, finding purpose beyond revenge, but Jerry ruins it by demanding Pissmaster join a galactic council, forcing a confrontation that reveals Rick's deception. The twist. Rick keeping Pissmaster's suicide note, showing it to Morty, creating a situation where Jerry gets blamed for Pissmaster's death, reveals Rick's therapy is incomplete. He's still manipulative. He's still cruel. But he's trying. The effort counts for something. Season 6 recovered critically, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, up from Season 5's 86%. But the fan reception remained mixed. One analysis noted, better than Season 5, not as strong as earlier seasons. The season lacked spectacle, no evil Morty, limited Rick Prime, mostly standalone episodes about family dynamics, therapy, and whether Jerry deserves respect. For viewers wanting mythology and serialization, Season 6 felt like wheel spinning. But for viewers paying attention to character development, Season 6 represented the show's emotional peak. Rick was genuinely changing. He attended therapy regularly. He helped Jerry multiple times. He spent 50 simulated years rescuing every fragment of Morty. He protected Pissmaster's daughter from grief. These weren't grand gestures. They were small acts of decency that cost Rick something to perform. That's what character growth looks like. Not dramatic declarations of love, but choosing to help when it's inconvenient. The revelation that Rick Prime is Morty's actual grandfather recontextualizes the entire show's premise. Rick isn't just a scientist having adventures with his grandson. He's a broken man living with the wrong family, using his grandson as bait to catch his wife's killer, unable to admit he's grown to love this family despite knowing they're not his. Every adventure, every lesson, every moment of connection, all of it happens under the shadow of this lie. Rick chose this family not because they were his, but because they belonged to his enemy. And then he fell in love with them anyway. Against his will, against his purpose, against everything he'd planned. Season 6 proved the show could work without constant universe hopping. The portal gun stayed broken most of the season. Episodes focused on Earth, on family, on relationships, rather than science fiction concepts. Night Family happened entirely in the house. Final Desmithation was a noir thriller about fortune cookies. Bethic Twinstinct explored sexuality and identity through character interaction rather than plot. These episodes succeeded or failed based on character writing, not high-concept premises, and they succeeded far more often than they failed. The season's quiet rebuilding established a foundation for Season 7's creative renaissance. By focusing on character over spectacle, emotion over concept, relationships over mythology, Season 6 reminded the show it could be excellent without being complicated. The family dynamics were funny and touching. Rick's therapy was genuinely affecting. The Beth's relationship was handled with surprising sensitivity. Jerry's moments of competence felt earned rather than ironic. But all this rebuilding faced its greatest test, Justin Roiland's firing. Section 7. The Royland recasting and the question of authorship. Justin Roiland's firing and replacement in Season 7 inadvertently became the ultimate litmus test of what Rick and Morty actually was. A show built on voice acting and shock value, or a show built on writing philosophy and character arcs. The show's continued creative success, with Ian Cardone and Harry Belden, proved it was always the latter, and revealed that Royland's improvisational style, while formative, may have been holding back the show's emotional depth.
Season 7's tighter character writing suggests that constraint breeds creativity.
The timeline of Royland's departure reads like a corporate thriller compressed into brutal efficiency. January 2020. Alleged domestic violence incident occurs. January 2023. Charges made public after 3 years of silence. January 24th, 2023. Adult Swim cuts ties with Royland immediately, announcing his departure from both Rick and Morty and Solar Opposites. March 2023. All criminal charges dropped due to insufficient evidence. The legal case collapsed, but Royland never returned to the show. Additional allegations surfaced. Inappropriate behavior with minors on social media, messages that never rose to criminal charges but created an HR nightmare. Adult Swim stayed silent on specifics, invoking only other things factored into the decision. The fan reaction split cleanly down ideological lines. One camp insisted Royland was totally innocent and got screwed over, pointing to the dropped charges as vindication, arguing that Adult Swim had overreacted to allegations that never resulted in convictions. Another camp noted the other things language, the pattern of behavior beyond the criminal case, the fact that companies don't fire their golden geese over nothing. The debate became proxy war for larger cultural battles about cancel culture, due process, and whether creative genius excuses personal misconduct. But beneath the moral arguments lurked a simpler question. Could Rick and Morty survive without Justin Roiland? The man had co-created the show. He'd voiced both title characters for 6 seasons. His improvisational style, the burps, the stammers, the manic energy, defined Rick's character. Morty's anxious teenage neurosis came directly from Royland's vocal performance. The show existed because Royland animated a parody short called The Real Animated Adventures of Doc and Marty in 2006, a crude Back to the Future parody where Doc Brown makes Marty lick his balls. Dan Harmon saw it, recognized the potential buried under the shock value, and approached Royland about developing it into a series. Without Royland, Rick and Morty literally doesn't exist. The production faced an impossible task: replace the irreplaceable while pretending nothing changed. Adult Swim kept the new voice actors secret until the Season 7 premiere. No press releases, no announcements. The marketing simply promoted Season 7 as if everything were normal. Fans speculated endlessly about who would replace Royland, whether they'd recast or use AI voice synthesis, whether the show would address the change in-universe or ignore it entirely. October 15th, 2023. Season 7 premieres with How Poopy Got His Poop Back. The credits reveal Ian Cardoni, voicing Rick, and Harry Belden, voicing Morty. The approach is sound alike, both actors doing impressions of Royland's original performances rather than reinventing the characters. Rick still burps, Morty still stammers, the vocal mannerisms remain intact. To casual viewers, the change is nearly imperceptible. To dedicated fans paying attention, something feels slightly off. The rhythm is different. The improvisational looseness has tightened into something more controlled. The critical reception told a complicated story. Season 7 scored 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, the lowest of any season except arguably Season 5, depending on how you weight different metrics. But the reviews themselves were largely positive. Critics praised the season's emotional depth, its willingness to resolve long-running storylines, its tighter narrative focus. The lower aggregate score came from fewer total reviews, not from negative reception. The show had lost some of its cultural penetration. Fewer critics bothered reviewing it, but those who did generally found the season strong. Fan reactions varied wildly based on what aspects of the show people valued. Some viewers claimed they honestly don't hear a difference between the old and new voices. Others found the change jarring. Most lines sound like they weren't recorded with any frame of reference to the conversation. One detailed critique noted Morty's new voice adds that squeak/crack/grating to the end of way too many lines. Sounds totally unnatural and forced. Rick's new voice generally fared better. Sounds basically the same to me. Even evil Morty's new voice earned praise. Sounds better than Royland's original performance. The technical criticisms revealed something important about Royland's improvisational style. When Royland voiced Rick and Morty, he'd often record both characters in the same session, playing off himself, creating a conversational flow that felt natural despite being one person talking to himself. The new actors recorded separately. This created technical challenges, matching energy levels, maintaining conversational rhythm, capturing the sense that Rick and Morty are reacting to each other rather than performing scripted lines. Early Season 7 episodes sometimes felt slightly stilted, like the actors were nailing their individual lines without quite connecting as scene partners. But something else emerged in the new performances: emotional clarity. Royland's improvisational style created energy and spontaneity. It also created ambiguity. When Rick burps mid-sentence, is he drunk? Deflecting? Both? The burps could mean anything, which made them useful for covering emotional moments without committing to them. Royland's stammering delivery for Morty worked similarly. Was Morty anxious? Lying? Thinking? All of the above? The vocal performance left room for interpretation. Cardoni and Belden's more controlled performances closed that ambiguity. When Rick speaks, you can hear exactly what he's feeling. When Morty stammers, it's clearly anxiety rather than vocal improvisation. The emotional beats land more precisely. The cost is spontaneity, the gain is depth. Season 7 episodes feel more scripted, more deliberately constructed. Whether this is improvement or degradation depends entirely on what you value in the show. The debate about Royland's creative contribution extends beyond voice acting into writing. Royland received co-creator credit and executive producer status, but Dan Harmon ran the writer's room. Industry reporting suggested Royland's involvement decreased over time. Present for early seasons, increasingly absent in later ones, often showing up primarily for voice recording sessions. Some crew members described him as essential to the show's DNA. Others suggested his main contribution was voice work and initial character concepts, with Harmon and the writing staff doing the heavy narrative lifting. This ambiguity made Royland's departure a natural experiment. If the show collapsed without him, it proved his creative vision was essential. If the show continued at similar quality, it suggested his contribution was more limited than his co-creator credit implied. Season 7 provided data for this experiment, and the data was striking. The show not only survived, but thrived in specific ways. Consider the emotional arcs. Season 7 resolved the Rick Prime storyline, the show's longest-running revenge quest, in episode 5, rather than dragging it across the entire season. Unmortrican featured Rick and Morty teaming with evil Morty to hunt Rick Prime, finally cornering him in his fortress and Rick beating him to death in front of Morty after discovering Rick Prime had killed countless versions of Diane across infinite dimensions. The episode could have been the season finale. Instead, it aired mid-season, subverting expectations by treating the show's biggest mythology payoff as just another adventure. Fear No Mort became the season's emotional centerpiece, an episode where Rick and Morty fall into a fear hole that shows them their deepest fears. Morty fears losing Rick. Rick fears becoming his father, hurting Morty, being alone. The climax features Rick keeping a photo of Morty in his wallet, a visual confirmation of affection Rick would never verbalize. One fan called it my favorite episode of the entire show, praising its massive character growth for Rick and Morty, accomplished through self-contained episode that didn't require big set pieces. These episodes prioritized character emotion over plot mechanics. They trusted the audience to care about Rick and Morty's relationship without constant spectacle. They allowed quiet moments, Rick looking at Morty's photo, Morty choosing to trust Rick despite knowing Rick lies, to carry dramatic weight. This approach requires vocal performances that can handle subtlety, that can communicate complex emotions through delivery rather than just hitting punchlines. Royland's improvisational style excelled at comedy. The burps were funny, the stammering was endearing, the manic energy made scenes crackle. But did that style serve dramatic moments equally well? Season 7 suggested maybe not. Cardoni and Belden's more controlled performances allowed emotional beats to breathe. When Rick admits vulnerability, you hear it clearly. When Morty makes a choice, the decision lands with weight. The performances serve the writing rather than overwhelming it. This doesn't mean Royland was bad at his job. It means his approach suited certain kinds of storytelling better than others. Seasons 1 to 3's balance of comedy and philosophy worked brilliantly with Royland's vocal chaos. The show could be wild and thoughtful simultaneously. But as the show evolved toward character drama, as Rick's arc required more emotional honesty and Morty's required more agency, Royland's improvisational unpredictability became harder to reconcile with the tighter character writing. The constraint imposed by recasting, new actors following established patterns rather than improvising freely, forced the show to commit fully to being a character drama. The writers couldn't rely on vocal performance to paper over emotional ambiguity. They had to write clear emotional arcs. They had to trust the actors to deliver lines as written rather than hoping improvisation would save underwritten moments. This constraint bred creativity in the writing room, pushing the show toward the emotional precision that made Season 7's best episodes work. The sound-alike approach deserves examination. Adult Swim could have reinvented Rick and Morty with radically different vocal interpretations. Instead, they chose continuity. Cardoni and Belden were hired specifically to sound like Royland, to preserve the show's established audio identity. This decision prioritized audience comfort over creative reinvention. It also created a strange dynamic where everyone knew the voices had changed, but nobody acknowledged it in-universe. Rick and Morty sounded slightly different, and the show pretended they didn't. Some fans found this approach cowardly. If you're replacing the voices, replace them. Don't do impressions of the original. Others appreciated the continuity. The show is Rick and Morty. It should sound like Rick and Morty. Changing the voices entirely would be admitting the show died with Royland's departure. The sound-alike approach said, the show is bigger than any one person, even its co-creator. The production kept one detail secret until after the premiere. John Allen voiced Mr. Poopy Butthole's Season 7 appearances. Mr. Poopy Butthole had been one of Royland's signature characters, a lovable parasite who appeared in post-credit sequences offering meta-commentary on episodes. Allen's impression was so accurate that many fans didn't realize the change. This success validated the sound-alike approach. If audiences couldn't tell the difference, the change didn't matter artistically, even if it mattered legally and ethically. Dan Harmon's role became crucial after Royland's departure. Harmon had always been the show's narrative architect, but with Royland gone, Harmon became the sole creative anchor. His name recognition, his track record with Community, his story circle methodology, all of it became the foundation on which the show's continuity rested. If Season 7 failed, Harmon would bear the blame alone. If it succeeded, he'd proven the show was primarily his vision all along. The success felt like vindication for Harmon's approach to serialized storytelling. The Rick Prime resolution demonstrated the show could deliver on long-term narrative promises. The emotional depth showed character development could happen without sacrificing comedy. The willingness to take risks, killing Rick Prime mid-season, building an entire episode around a fear hole, letting Rick be genuinely vulnerable, proved the writing was strong enough to carry the show without relying on vocal improvisation to create energy. But something was lost. Royland's chaotic energy had given the show unpredictability. You never quite knew where a scene would go when Royland was improvising. The new performances are more controlled, more consistent, more professional. They're also less wild. Season 7 is the show's most emotionally satisfying season. It's also its most conventional. The trade-off was probably necessary for the show's long-term health, but it's worth acknowledging what was traded. The question of authorship remains complicated. Did Justin Roiland create Rick and Morty? Yes, literally. He made the Doc and Marty short that inspired the show. He co-developed the premise with Harmon. He voiced the title characters for 6 seasons. His creative fingerprints are all over the show's DNA. But did the show need him to continue? Season 7 suggests no. The writing was strong enough, the character foundation solid enough, the other actors talented enough to sustain the show without him. This realization changes how we understand Rick and Morty's creative identity. The show isn't one person's vision. It's a collaborative creation where the core premise and characters can outlive their original performers. This is normal for live-action television. Actors get replaced, shows continue. It's rarer in animation, where voice actors often define characters so completely that replacement seems impossible. Rick and Morty proved animation can work like live-action in this respect. The voices changed, the show continued. The quality remained high. Whether this is good news depends on your perspective. If you believe shows should be singular artistic visions tied to specific creators, Royland's departure and the show's survival represents a kind of death, the original thing ending, a simulacrum continuing. If you believe shows are collaborative enterprises where individual contributors can be replaced while preserving core identity, Season 7 represents triumph. The show proving its strength lies in its foundation, not its voice actors. The truth probably lives between these extremes. Rick and Morty changed when Royland left. It became more controlled, more emotionally direct, less wildly improvisational. Whether these changes constitute improvement or degradation depends entirely on what you valued in the original. But the show didn't die, it evolved. And evolution, even forced evolution, can produce unexpected strengths.
The proof was in what the writers chose to do. But after Season 6 rebuilt the show around quieter character work and emotional honesty, everything it had just stabilized was immediately put to the test by Justin Roiland's exit and the recasting of Rick and Morty in Season 7. Section 8. Season 7's masterclass in subversion and character growth. Season 7 succeeded by inverting every expectation, resolving Rick Prime in Episode 5 instead of dragging it out for seasons, prioritizing standalone character studies over serialization, and proving that simple episodes about fear, spaghetti, and trust can be more emotionally devastating than multiverse-ending stakes. The season's creative renaissance came from treating its characters like people rather than meme generators, trusting that 7 seasons of development had earned the right to slow, contemplative storytelling. This was Rick and Morty finally comfortable being itself rather than what fans demanded. The decision to kill Rick Prime in Unmortican mid-season represents the show's most audacious narrative choice. For 5 seasons, Rick Prime had been the white whale, the Rick who murdered Diane, who started everything, who represented Rick's entire motivation for becoming who he is. Traditional television storytelling demands you milk that conflict for maximum drama. Build to it slowly, make it the season finale, probably make it the series finale. Conventional wisdom says a revenge quest this fundamental should anchor multiple seasons of television. Rick and Morty killed him in Episode 5 and moved on. The episode opens with Rick drunk, Morty feeding him alcohol while secretly activating a device. Rick passes out. The camera reveals Morty has been working with evil Morty, who appears through a portal. They've been coordinating. Morty has been playing both sides, helping Rick hunt Rick Prime while simultaneously helping evil Morty track the hunt. The betrayal feels earned. Morty has watched Rick self-destruct chasing revenge for years. Someone had to intervene. Evil Morty's motivation is different. Rick Prime created the Omega device, a weapon that can erase someone across all realities. Evil Morty escaped the central finite curve to get away from Rick's. The last thing he needs is a weapon that could drag him back, that could erase him across every universe he's fled to. Self-preservation demands Rick Prime dies and the Omega device gets destroyed. Their goals align. The hunt leads them to Rick Prime's trap, a box designed to catch Ricks hunting him. Multiple revenge-obsessed Ricks are trapped inside, all seeking the same goal. Rick Prime's hologram taunts them. If you're seeing this, you're me, except, less. But you acted like you were better, so I killed your beloved Diane. The hologram explains the Omega device, how it erased Diane from every universe across infinity. Then comes the twist. One of you is going to get your Diane back. All you have to do is be the last Rick left. The Ricks immediately turn on each other. Our Rick screams, "He's lying! He can't bring her back!" Nobody listens. They're too desperate. The massacre begins. Rick, Morty, and Evil Morty fight their way through, ultimately escaping when Evil Morty figures out the portal-blocking technology using residue from the trap itself. They track Rick Prime to his fortress. The confrontation is brutal. Rick Prime mocks Rick for keeping Diane's voice in his ship's AI. "You sentimental little fella." He threatens to use the Omega device on Rick's entire family, one by one, starting with Slow Mobius, a beloved background character whose superpower is moving slowly. Rick Prime erases him. Slow Mobius dies in slow motion, his death stretched across agonizing seconds while Rick screams. The fight escalates. Rick Prime nearly wins, but Evil Morty intervenes, switching shirts with Morty to confuse Rick Prime's targeting systems. The deception works. Evil Morty gets Rick Prime's weapon schematics, while Rick gets Rick Prime himself. What follows is Rick beating Rick Prime to death with his bare hands. No clever gadgets, no sci-fi weapons, just violence. Rick Prime taunts him throughout. "What's your life without me?" Rick responds, "Let's find out." He doesn't stop hitting until Rick Prime is unrecognizable. Evil Morty watches. When it's over, he asks the question that matters. How's it feel? Better? No? Exactly the same? Yeah, it always does. Revenge doesn't heal, it just ends. Evil Morty takes the Omega device schematics and leaves, warning Rick never to follow him. The episode ends with Rick standing in silence, covered in blood, having finally killed the person who defined his entire existence, and feeling nothing. Fans expected this confrontation to be the series finale. Some thought it would anchor an entire season. The show resolved at mid-season and kept going.
This choice communicated something crucial. Rick Prime was never the point. The revenge was never the point. Rick's journey toward accepting loss, toward building something instead of destroying, toward choosing his found family over his original tragedy, that was always the point. Killing Rick Prime didn't complete Rick's arc. It just removed an excuse for avoiding it. That's Morty demonstrates the season's commitment to moral complexity through the most absurd premise imaginable. Rick discovers a planet where people who commit suicide transform into spaghetti. Not metaphorically, literally. Their bodies convert into pasta and marinara sauce. Rick has been harvesting this spaghetti and serving it at family dinners for weeks. When Morty discovers the truth, he's horrified. Rick's response: "Obviously not a person. Why? No, why is it always this shit with you?" Morty demands to attend a funeral, to know the names of the people they've eaten. He gives a speech admitting they ate the deceased. The planetary government hears about this, contacts Morty, offers him a job as ambassador for ethical suicide spaghetti. They'll implement right-to-die laws. People can choose to become spaghetti. Morty meets Tanya, who consents to dying and becoming dinner. She says, "I hope I'm delicious." Morty brings her body home. The family enjoys guilt-free spaghetti, but the system collapses. Suicide rates skyrocket. The planet becomes a factory farm for human spaghetti, selling it across the galaxy. Society optimizes for death. They paint their sun institutional gray to increase depression. They remove safety rails from bridges. They program television to be nothing but reality TV and morning zoo radio. Content designed to make you want to die. The episode's central question? If you can make death serve a purpose, does that justify encouraging it? Morty tries to fix it. He works with Rick to create clones that aren't quite people, just enough biology to become spaghetti without being conscious. The clones fail every ethical test. Either they're too human and it's murder, or they're not human enough and they don't transform into spaghetti. The episode refuses to provide an easy answer. Eventually, Rick synthesizes spaghetti from one final volunteer, a man dying in pain who agrees to have his entire life broadcast while he dies. The broadcast is set to Oasis's Live Forever, a song about immortality, playing over someone choosing death. The kicker? When people watch his whole life before eating him, the spaghetti becomes inedible. Not because of anything wrong with it, because knowing the full complexity of a human life makes consumption impossible. The solution to the spaghetti crisis is to make people actually confront what they're eating. Once they do, they lose their appetite. The episode ends with the family eating Salisbury steak. Summer asks if it's really Salisbury steak. Rick responds, "Do you want to know or not?" She chooses not to know. Rick warns her, "Just so you know, it's really bad. I won't tell you, but I need you to know the truth is horrible, so that if you ever find out on accident, you can't blame me." The episode is about complicity, about how systems convince us the things we consume are ethical when they're not, about how knowing the full truth of where things come from makes comfort impossible. It's a 22-minute meditation on capitalism, suicide, ethical consumption, and whether good intentions matter when the results are catastrophic. And it's wrapped in a joke about spaghetti. Only Rick and Morty could make that work. The Jarek Trap explores Rick and Jerry's relationship through a brain swap gone wrong. Rick swaps his mind into Jerry's brain, and vice versa, to prove genius isn't innate. It's earned through intelligence Rick was born with. The swap goes badly. Their minds fragment and merge, creating Jerky, a fusion personality that combines Rick's intelligence with Jerry's emotional openness. Jerky is happy, genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. He goes on adventures with both parts of himself working in harmony. He bonds with Gene over the rake. He saves the family from criminals. He's everything Rick and Jerry could be if they stopped fighting. But Jerky can't last. The family forces them to separate because the fusion, however functional, isn't the people they know. The episode ends with Rick and Jerry back in their original bodies, immediately resuming their antagonistic relationship. Rick insults Jerry. Jerry fires back. Everything returns to normal, except the episode reveals what Memory Rick, a fragment of Rick trapped in Jerry's mind during the fusion, says in the post-credits scene. Day and meta of attempting to escape Jerry's mind. It has become increasingly clear my daughter married a man who remembers all technology as powered by springs and gears. The joke becomes poignant. Rick is literally trapped in Jerry's mind now, forever experiencing Jerry's perception of reality. The fusion changed nothing externally, but everything internally. Rick now understands Jerry in a way he can never unknow, and he still chooses to insult him at breakfast, because that's who they are. The episode is about how understanding doesn't always lead to acceptance, how closeness doesn't guarantee harmony, how sometimes people who love each other still hurt each other because changing is harder than continuing patterns. Air Force Wong brings unity back while exploring Rick's relationship with Dr. Wong and the president. The president wants to date Dr. Wong. Rick is furious. She's his therapist. It's unprofessional. It crosses boundaries. Meanwhile, unity has taken over Virginia, turning it into a perfect society. The president declares it an emergency. Rick sprays Unity with a repellent he invented called separation, a scent designed to make Unity unable to control him. The defensive measure reveals how much Rick has thought about Unity returning, how afraid he is of losing control to her again. Unity calls Rick, concerned because she's heard he's hunting Rick Prime again. "You almost died last time," she says. Rick refuses to talk. He seals Virginia in a dome, trapping Unity inside. But the president secretly merges with Unity's severed finger, the part Rick cut off, hoping to gain popularity. The finger takes over America. Rick needs Unity's help to fix it. Dr. Wong mediates. The therapy session happens on Unity's ship. Dr. Wong asks Rick if he trusts Unity. Rick admits he doesn't. "You ghosted me to focus on your work. Your work is absorbing the universe." "But it's my universe." Unity agrees to help anyway, releasing hundreds of millions of people simultaneously. The strain nearly kills her. She collapses afterward. Rick offers painkillers. Unity refuses. "No thank you." Rick offers to hang out. "I mean, you can hang out if you want. Come see the kids. I trust you now." Unity's response cuts him. "That's nice, but I don't trust you." The ending shows Unity's voicemails to Rick, weeks of. Calls Rick ignored while hunting Rick Prime. "Give me a call, okay? I heard you were going after that guy again. Just made me worried. I care about you. I just want to know you're all right." Unity camped out in Virginia trying to reach him. Rick ignored everything to pursue revenge. The person who loved him tried to help, and he shut her out completely. The episode asks whether Rick's growth is real or just performance, whether therapy works if you only apply it selectively, whether someone who ignores voicemails from people worried about him deserves the trust he demands from others. Fear No Mort became the season's emotional centerpiece through deceptive simplicity. Rick and Morty visit a fear hole, a supernatural toilet in a Denny's bathroom that manifests your greatest fear. You jump in, conquer the fear, emerge fearless. Only 3 people have ever succeeded. Morty jumps in as a joke. Rick follows. They both get trapped because the hole doesn't just manifest fear. It manifests the fear of thinking you've escaped when you haven't. Morty's fear is that Rick doesn't need him. The hole manifests Rick getting Diane back, becoming happy, no longer requiring Morty's companionship. Hologram Diane taunts Morty. "Rick will abandon you now." Meanwhile, Rick's fear is simpler but deeper, accepting happiness. The hole manifests Diane because Rick's greatest terror is having a second chance with her and wasting it, proving he doesn't deserve what he lost. The two fears intertwine. Morty tries to save Rick from dying in the hole by flooding it with his own fear. Childhood humiliations, rejections, moments of not being accepted. The hole feeds on it, but it's not enough. Morty performs a school play naked to conquer his fear of acceptance. The performance works. They escape, except they haven't. They're still in the hole, cycling through layers of false escapes. The real escape happens when Morty admits his actual fear. "I'm afraid you'd never say that in real life. I'm afraid that if I jumped into a hole, you wouldn't even bother jumping in after me. You just stand there and watch." Morty's fear isn't that Rick will leave him. It's that Rick was never really with him. That their whole relationship is Morty's fantasy of being important to someone who sees him as replaceable. Cut to reality. Rick, standing outside the hole, waiting. Morty emerges alone. Rick asks, "How was it? Was it spiders?" Morty deflects. Rick explains, "It's a one-person ride. You can't face 2 fears at the same time." Rick never went in. Morty was alone the entire time. But Rick waited. He didn't leave. He stood outside a bathroom in a Denny's for however long it took. When Morty asks, "Am I irreplaceable?" Rick responds, define irreplaceable. It's the most Rick answer possible, deflecting through philosophy. But he waited. That's the answer that matters. The episode ends with a reveal. Rick has been carrying a photo of Morty in his wallet. Not Rick and Morty, just Morty. A picture Rick keeps with him that he looks at when Morty's not around. The photo appears in other episodes, a detail so subtle most viewers miss it, but it's there. Rick carries Morty with him. He won't say he needs Morty. He won't admit Morty's irreplaceable. but the photo tells a different story. One fan called it my favorite episode of the entire show, praising its massive character growth for Rick and Morty accomplished through self-contained episode that didn't require big set pieces. Another noted the episode proved the show could deliver emotional devastation through character work rather than plot. The fear wasn't monsters or death, it was the fear of not mattering to someone you love, and the fear of admitting you love someone you could lose. Season 7's critical reception reflected the tonal shift. 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, the lowest score yet, but the reviews themselves were largely positive. The lower aggregate came from fewer critics reviewing, not from negative reception. The show had lost some cultural penetration. Fewer people cared enough to write about it, but those who engaged found a show more emotionally mature, more willing to be vulnerable, more confident in its character work than ever before. The voice acting controversy faded surprisingly fast. By mid-season, most viewers accepted Cardone and Belden's performances. The sound-alike approach worked. The show sounded like Rick and Morty. Some fans still heard the difference. Adds that squeak, crack, grating to the end of way too many lines. But casual viewers adapted. The writing carried the show, the performances served the writing. That was enough. Season 7 demonstrated that Rick and Morty could survive not just without Royland, but could thrive by committing fully to being a character drama. The season's best episodes, Unmortrican, Fear No Mort, That's a Morte, worked because they treated Rick and Morty like people with interior lives, rather than vehicles for sci-fi concepts. The show had earned 7 seasons of goodwill. It used that capital to slow down, to explore, to trust that watching Rick carry a photo of Morty is more compelling than another multiverse apocalypse. This approach reveals the show's philosophy about storytelling itself. Section 9. The Serialization Paradox. Why Episodic Storytelling Won. Rick and Morty's refusal to commit fully to either episodic or serialized formats isn't indecision, it's the show's secret weapon. By using serialization as seasoning rather than structure, the show creates genuine character moments that wouldn't work in a traditional arc, while maintaining the flexibility to tell any story it wants. The Rick Prime resolution mid-season wasn't a waste of build-up, it was a statement that the show values character growth over plot mechanics, relationships over mystery boxes. This approach frustrates plot-obsessed fans, but creates emotionally honest television. Rick Potion number 9 established the template in Season 1, Episode 6. Morty asks Rick for a love potion to make Jessica fall for him. Rick warns him against it, but complies anyway. The potion works. Then it goes airborne. Then it mutates. Within minutes, the entire world, except Morty's family, has transformed into Cronenberg monsters, grotesque flesh horror amalgamations of humans and animals. Rick tries to fix it. He can't. His solution? Find a dimension where they fixed the problem, but then died immediately afterward. Rick and Morty bury their own corpses in the backyard and assume their lives. The episode ends with Morty digging a grave for himself, hands shaking, burying his own body, while Rick tells him, "Don't think about it." This moment, this traumatic, reality-shattering moment, could have been the season finale. It could have anchored an entire arc about Morty processing what he's done, about the family discovering the truth, about Rick facing consequences. Instead, the show moved on. Next episode, different adventure, no mention of the Cronenberg world. Except the consequences did matter. When Solarix aired in Season 6, the show returned to the Cronenberg dimension. Morty materializes there when portal travel resets, sending everyone back to their reality of origin. He discovers Jerry Prime living alone. Beth and Summer Prime are dead, frozen in ice and thawed incorrectly. Jerry has survived through self-help books and brutal pragmatism. He's become competent in the way trauma forces competence. When Morty tries to reconnect, Jerry robs him and flees. The abandonment from Season 1 has consequences 5 years later. Not because the show planned a 5-year arc, because the show remembered. This is the paradox at Rick and Morty's core. Events have consequences when those consequences serve character development, not when a flowchart demands them. The Cronenberg world matters in Season 6 because it reveals Morty's guilt, Jerry's transformation, the cost of Rick and Morty's original escape. It doesn't matter in Season 2 because dwelling on it would prevent new stories. The show trusts viewers to remember without forcing them to care every episode. The Rick Lantis mix-up demonstrates the opposite approach. Surprise serialization. The episode abandons Rick and Morty entirely to focus on the Citadel of Ricks. Multiple storylines follow different Rick and Morty pairs. a cop Rick investigating corruption, a factory worker Morty seeking better opportunities, a school teacher Rick encouraging Morty students, a campaign manager Morty running evil Morty for president. The storylines interweave. The cop Rick discovers the Citadel's leadership is corrupt. The factory Morty realizes the system won't reward his hard work. The teacher Rick gets fired for teaching Mortys they're not inferior. Evil Morty wins the presidency in a landslide. The final sequence reveals evil Morty orchestrated everything. He executes the Shadow Council. He consolidates power. He's not a villain of the week. He's been planning this since Season 1, Episode 10, when he first appeared. The episode aired as Season 3, Episode 7. That's 2 seasons and 16 episodes between appearances. Most shows would check in regularly, building tension through multiple episodes per season. Rick and Morty waited 2 years, then delivered a masterpiece that recontextualized everything. The episode earned widespread critical acclaim. IGN nominated it for Best TV Episode. Fans called it the show's finest achievement, but it also set a dangerous precedent. Now audiences expected more evil Morty, more Citadel politics, more serialized storytelling. The show responded by making them wait another 2 seasons. Evil Morty returned in the Season 5 finale, Rick Mirai Jack, where he destroyed the Citadel and escaped the central finite curve. Then he returned in Season 7's Unmortricken, helping kill Rick Prime before leaving again. 3 appearances across 7 seasons. That's it. That's all the evil Morty the show deemed necessary. Fans wanted more. Of course they wanted more. Evil Morty represents the show's most compelling mythology. A Morty who broke free from Rick's control, who saw through the multiverse's structure, who escaped entirely. His story could anchor seasons of television. The show refuses, because evil Morty's power comes from absence. He appears when his presence serves a narrative purpose, not when a broadcast schedule demands content. Rick Mirai Jack needed him to destroy the Citadel and reveal Rick's backstory. Unmortricken needed him to steal the Omega device schematics and provide outside perspective on Rick's revenge quest. Between those moments, he doesn't matter. He's off being free, which is the whole point of his character. This selectivity extends to every serialized element. Rick's search for Rick Prime spans 6 seasons, from the Rick Shank Rickdemption to Unmortricken. 6 seasons where the hunt happens mostly off-screen, where Rick occasionally mentions it but never dwells on it, where the audience knows Rick is looking, but the show refuses to make that the story. When they finally kill Rick Prime, it happens in Episode 5 of Season 7, not the finale. Evil Morty asks Rick afterward, "How's it feel? Better? No? Exactly the same?" The line acknowledges what serialized storytelling promises: closure, catharsis, resolution. Rick gets none of those things. The revenge was never the point. Dan Harmon's story circle methodology explains part of this approach. The circle, derived from Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, structures individual episodes. Character in comfort zone, wants something, enters unfamiliar situation, adapts to it, gets what they wanted, pays a price, returns to comfort zone, having changed. The circle works for 22-minute stories. It provides satisfying arcs that reset by episode's end, but it also allows for accumulation. Each circle can build on previous ones. Rick starts Season 1 as a nihilistic drunk. 7 seasons of circles later, he attends therapy, trusts Morty, carries a photo in his wallet. The change happens gradually through standalone stories, not through a master plan. The writing room's approach reinforces this. According to industry reporting, the writers deliberately avoid revisiting old tropes unless they can subvert them or add something new. The show could do interdimensional cable every season. Fans love those episodes. Instead, they did it twice in 3 seasons, then stopped. They could bring back Mr. Meeseeks, Scary Terry, Fart, any number of beloved one-off characters. They rarely do, because repetition is the enemy of surprise, and surprise is how the show stays alive. This philosophy frustrates fans who want answers to drop plot lines. What happened to the president living in the White House orbiting Earth? What about Phoenix Person's recovery? Where's Bird Person's daughter? The show introduces fascinating concepts and then abandons them, trusting that the next concept will be equally fascinating. This works when the new ideas deliver. It fails when they don't. Season 5's weaker episodes felt weak partly because they abandoned interesting threads for less interesting ones. But the strategy itself,
prioritizing new stories over resolving old ones keeps the show from becoming a mystery box that collapses under its own mythology. Fear No Mort exemplifies how episodic storytelling can achieve emotional depth serialization promises but rarely delivers. The episode is completely standalone. Rick and Morty visit a fear hole, jump in, face their fears, escape. No mythology. No callbacks except Diane, who appears as Morty's manifestation of his fear that Rick doesn't need him. The episode could air in any season and make sense, but it works because 7 seasons of character development have established who Rick and Morty are. Morty's fear that he's replaceable lands because we've watched Rick treat him as replaceable. Rick's fear of accepting happiness lands because we've watched him self-sabotage for years. The episode's climax, Rick revealing he carries Morty's photo, hits harder than any serialized payoff could because it's not a payoff. It's a character detail that exists independent of plot. Rick didn't start carrying the photo because of some inciting incident the show will flash back to. He carries it because he loves Morty in a way he can't verbalize. That's not a mystery the show needs to solve, that's just who Rick is now. The standalone format freed the writers to focus on emotion rather than plot mechanics. Compare this to shows that commit fully to serialization. Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, The Wire. These shows build season-long arcs where every episode advances the central narrative. They achieve profound character development through sustained focus, but they also trap themselves. Breaking Bad couldn't suddenly do a lighthearted episode about Walter White teaching chemistry. The Wire couldn't pause its institutional critique for a standalone comedy. The serialized format demands consistency, which limits flexibility. Rick and Morty can do That's a Morte, a standalone episode about suicide spaghetti that's simultaneously a meditation on capitalism and ethical consumption, immediately after Air Force Wong, which advances Rick's therapy and his relationship with. Unity, which follows The Jarek Trap, which explores Rick and Jerry's relationship through body horror. None of these episodes require the others to work. None of them would improve with more serialization. They succeed by being exactly what they need to be. Focused character studies using science fiction as framework rather than subject. This approach also protects the show from serialization's greatest weakness, fan theorizing overtaking the narrative. When shows commit to mystery boxes, Lost, Westworld, True Detective, they create implicit promises about eventual answers. Fans theorize endlessly. Reddit threads dissect every frame. The show becomes defined by its mysteries rather than its characters. Resolutions almost never satisfy because fans have spent years building perfect solutions in their heads. The actual answer can't compete with infinite imagination. Rick and Morty sidesteps this by refusing to promise answers. The show introduces Rick Prime in Season 1, barely mentions him for seasons, then kills him mid-Season 7. No elaborate reveal. No shocking twist. Rick Prime is exactly what he appeared to be. A Rick who doesn't care about anything, who killed Diane because our Rick rejected portal technology, who represents nihilism taken to its logical extreme. The mystery was never, who is Rick Prime, but can Rick accept that killing him won't fix anything? That's a character question, not a plot question. Character questions have emotionally satisfying answers. Plot questions have factually satisfying answers. Emotional satisfaction lasts longer. The fan frustration with this approach is understandable. Viewers invest in characters, become attached to storylines, want resolution. When the show abandons Bird Person for 2 seasons, it feels like betrayal. When evil Morty appears 3 times in 7 seasons, it feels like wasted potential. When Phoenix Person shows up in Season 5 and then disappears again, it feels like the show is dangling carrots without delivering meals. These criticisms are valid. The show does abandon threads. It does leave questions unanswered. It does prioritize new stories over resolving old ones. But the alternative, full serialization, would kill what makes Rick and Morty work. The show succeeds because any episode could feature Rick turning himself into a pickle, or Rick and Jerry's minds merging, or an entire planet built on suicide spaghetti, or Morty's consciousness fragmenting across billions of NPCs. Full serialization would require every episode to advance the central plot, which means no more standalone experiments. The show would become what fans say they want, a tight narrative about Rick hunting Rick Prime, broken only by occasional breathers. That show would be more coherent. It would also be more boring.
The serialization paradox resolves when you recognize what Rick and Morty actually is. A character drama that uses episodic storytelling to explore its characters from every possible angle. The show doesn't need Rick Prime dying to be the finale, because his death doesn't complete Rick's arc. Rick's arc is learning to accept love, to trust others, to build rather than destroy. That arc happens through standalone episodes about fear holes and spaghetti planets and therapy sessions with Dr. Wong. The serialized elements, Rick Prime, Evil Morty, the Citadel, exist to provide context and stakes, but they're not the story. They're background radiation that makes the character moments more meaningful. This storytelling flexibility serves the show's core theme. But the way Season 7 pulled this off wasn't by committing harder to big mythology, but by proving that Rick and Morty works best when long arcs stay in the background and individual episodes do the real emotional work. Section 10. Nihilism as setup, not punchline. The philosophical journey. The show's philosophical evolution charts a precise course. Rick's toxic nihilism, seasons 1 to 3, spreads like a virus through the family, seasons 4 to 5, before Morty develops a healthier acceptance of meaninglessness, seasons 6 to 7, arguing that acknowledging the universe doesn't care is only step 1. Step 2 is choosing to care anyway. This journey required Rick to be genuinely wrong about something for once, his philosophy exposed as a defense mechanism rather than enlightenment. The show's fall in quality was actually it taking its own philosophy seriously. Nothing matters, but that means you're free to make your own meaning. 60 Minutes from Season 1 established the philosophical foundation through Morty's famous line. Summer discovers she was an unplanned pregnancy. Her parents considered abortion. She attempts to run away because she feels her existence was a mistake. Morty stops her with the most quoted speech in the show's history. Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die. Come watch TV. The line works on multiple levels. Superficially, it's nihilistic. Existence is random, life has no inherent purpose, death is inevitable. But the delivery transforms it. Morty isn't depressed when he says this. He's comforting. The meaninglessness isn't a tragedy to endure. It's a liberation. If nobody belongs anywhere, then Summer belongs here as much as anywhere else. If nobody exists on purpose, then there's no wrong way to exist. The universe doesn't care, which means you're free to choose what matters to you. And what Morty chooses is sitting with his sister watching TV. Small moments. Human connection. Things that don't matter in cosmic terms, but matter completely in human ones. Early seasons presented Rick as the show's philosophical center. His intelligence gave him authority. His nihilism seemed like enlightenment. When he told Morty, "Don't think about it," after they buried their own corpses, it read as wisdom. When he called love a chemical reaction, it sounded like truth. The show's comedy worked because Rick was right about the universe being meaningless and wrong about how to respond to that fact. But many viewers missed the second part. They adopted Rick's nihilism without recognizing it as pathology. Pickle Rick made the critique explicit. Rick transforms himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy. He builds weapons from rat organs, fights through a foreign government facility, kills dozens of people, all to avoid sitting in a room and talking about feelings. The action sequences are spectacular. Rick's ingenuity is on full display. And it's all completely pathetic, because he's using his genius to run away from his daughter. Doctor. Wong's diagnosis cuts through Rick's philosophy. Rick, the only connection between your unquestionable intelligence and the sickness destroying your family is that everyone in your family, you included, use intelligence to justify sickness. You seem to alternate between viewing your own mind as an unstoppable force and as an inescapable curse. And I think it's because the only truly unapproachable concept for you is that it's your mind within your control. She continues, "You chose to come here. You chose to talk, just as you chose to become a pickle. You are the master of your universe, and yet you are dripping with rat blood and feces. Your daughter isn't a barrier to your happiness. She's your own responsibility. I have no doubt that you would be bored senseless by therapy, the same way I'm bored when I brush my teeth and wipe my ass. Because the thing about repairing, maintaining, and cleaning is it's not an adventure. There's no way to do it so wrong you might die. It's just work." Rick has no response. He sits in silence. When the session ends, he and Beth immediately bond over dismissing Dr. Wong, going to get drinks instead of processing what she said. The family learned nothing, but the audience was supposed to learn everything. Rick's nihilism isn't wisdom, it's avoidance. His intelligence isn't enlightenment, it's a tool for justifying his refusal to do the emotional work required for relationships. The show's recurring catchphrase, Wubba Lubba Dub Dub, gets translated in an early episode. "I am in great pain, please help me." Rick's whole persona is a cry for help, disguised as superiority. His nihilism is depression given a philosophical framework. The joke is that everyone treats his suffering as comedy because he packages it as catchphrases and burps. He's screaming and nobody hears him because he's made sure they can't. The Old Man in the Seat from Season 4 pushes this critique further. Rick has a secret toilet on a distant planet where he goes to poop alone. Someone finds it and uses it. Rick becomes obsessed with hunting down whoever violated his private space. He finds Tony, a man whose wife is supposedly dead, who seems depressed and aimless. Rick threatens to kill him. Tony accepts death readily. Rick doesn't kill him. Instead, they bond. Later, Rick returns with gifts, vegan chili and sugar-free chocolates. Tony is dead. He quit his job, started living life to the fullest, crashed into a tree while space skiing down Mount Space Everest. The alien delivering the news says, he quit his job, started living life to the fullest. Rick processes this alone. The man he befriended, the one person who understood him, died because Rick gave him permission to live. The ending reveals Rick's secret. His toilet isn't just about privacy, it's about control. It's about having one thing that's completely his in a universe that takes everything. The episode's B-plot features Jerry and Morty accidentally helping an alien species take over Earth through a dating app. The aliens have perfected relationships, but need Earth's water. They use connection as a weapon. The irony is thick. Rick isolates himself while Earth gets conquered through forced intimacy. Both extremes fail. Rick's total isolation leads to depression and lost friendship. The aliens' enforced connection leads to conquest and exploitation. The episode ends with Rick installing a hologram of Tony on his toilet. The hologram yells at him every time he uses it, calling him king shit on his throne of loneliness, berating him for ruining his only friendship through inability to share. Rick programmed his toilet to torture him because he knows he deserves it. He knows his philosophy is poison. He just doesn't know how to stop drinking it. This self-awareness separates Rick's nihilism from healthy acceptance of meaninglessness. Rick knows the universe doesn't care. He also knows that realization doesn't have to lead to isolation and depression. But knowledge and behavior are different things. Rick can't act on what he knows because his entire identity is built on his philosophy. Admitting his nihilism is wrong means admitting he's wasted his life, that he's hurt people for no reason, that Diane's death didn't have to destroy him. That's too much to face. So he sits on a toilet that screams at him and pretends he doesn't understand why. The show explores the spread of Rick's philosophy through the family. Beth adopts it in the ABCs of Beth, questioning whether she's real or a clone and deciding she doesn't care. Summer weaponizes it in various episodes, using meaninglessness to justify cruelty or selfishness. Even Jerry briefly experiments with it in Season 4, though it sits poorly on him. Morty absorbs the most, becoming increasingly detached and cruel as seasons progress. But Morty's arc eventually diverges from Rick's. Where Rick uses nihilism to justify isolation, Morty uses it to justify connection. The "nobody exists on purpose" speech was always Morty's philosophy, not Rick's. Rick knows nothing matters. Morty knows nothing matters, but chooses to care anyway. That's the crucial difference. Rick's nihilism is a defense mechanism. Morty's is a foundation for meaning-making. Fear No Mort crystallizes this philosophical evolution. Morty's deepest fear is that Rick doesn't need him, that he's replaceable, that their relationship is one-sided. The fear hole manifests this by showing Rick reunited with Diane, happy without Morty. Meanwhile, Rick's deepest fear is accepting happiness, specifically getting a second chance with Diane and wasting it. Both fears stem from the same source, the terror that connection is possible and you'll ruin it. The episode forces both characters to confront whether they believe relationships have meaning in a meaningless universe. Rick's fear of happiness reveals he knows happiness is possible, he's just afraid he doesn't deserve it. Morty's fear of being replaceable reveals he knows Rick matters to him, he's just afraid the feeling isn't mutual. These aren't nihilistic fears. These are deeply human ones. The fear of not mattering to someone you love is only possible if you believe love matters. The resolution comes through acceptance rather than conquest. Morty admits he fears Rick wouldn't jump into a hole to save him. Cut to reality. Rick never entered the hole, but he waited outside. He didn't leave. When Morty emerges and asks, "Am I irreplaceable?" Rick deflects. Define irreplaceable. But the answer is the photo in Rick's wallet. He carries Morty with him. That's not philosophy. That's love. The show's philosophical journey required Rick to be wrong. Not wrong about cosmic meaninglessness. Wrong about the conclusion he draws from it. The universe doesn't care. Death is inevitable. Nothing lasts forever. These are facts. But, therefore nothing matters is a choice, not a logical conclusion. Rick chose isolation and cruelty because facing vulnerability hurts. Morty chose connection and care because isolation hurts more. This distinction echoes real philosophical debates. Lovecraftian cosmicism argues that discovering the universe's true nature, that humanity is insignificant, that nothing we do matters on a cosmic scale, should lead to madness or despair. Existentialism argues the opposite. Recognizing meaninglessness is liberating because it means you're free to create your own meaning. Rick embodies the first. Morty grows into the second. The show's quality decline in seasons 4 to 5 was actually at taking this philosophy seriously. If nothing matters, why not make an episode about spaghetti suicide? If meaning is self-created, why not explore what happens when a society optimizes for death? If the universe is random, why not do an episode where Rick and Jerry's minds merge? The weaker episodes in these seasons failed not because they embraced meaninglessness, but because they didn't balance that meaninglessness with emotional honesty. That's Amorte succeeds where Season 5's Rick-dependent spray fails, because it commits to its philosophical question. If you can give death meaning, should you? The spaghetti becomes delicious when people volunteer to die. It becomes inedible when people are forced to confront the full complexity of the life they're consuming. The episode argues that meaning requires context. Stripping context makes consumption easy, but hollow. Restoring context makes consumption impossible, but meaningful. Compare that to the sperm episode, which asks no questions and answers nothing. It's just gross. The philosophical void isn't the problem. The lack of engagement with that void is. That's Amorte, stares into the abyss and finds uncomfortable truths about capitalism, consent, and whether good intentions matter when systems produce harm. The sperm episode stares into the abyss and makes a joke about Morty masturbating. One respects the audience's intelligence, the other doesn't. Season 7's success came from committing fully to the philosophical journey. Unmortricken shows Rick finally killing the person who murdered Diane and feeling nothing. Evil Morty asks, "How's it feel? Better? No? Exactly the same?" The episode argues that revenge doesn't heal because the wound was never about Rick Prime. It was about Rick refusing to process loss. Killing Rick Prime doesn't change anything because the problem was always internal. The Jarek trap explores this through Rick and Jerry's fusion. Jarek-y is happy because he combines intelligence with emotional openness. Rick's genius plus Jerry's willingness to feel equals functional happiness. But separating them returns both to dysfunction because neither can sustain what the fusion taught them. Knowledge doesn't equal change. Rick knows isolation is bad. Jerry knows he needs confidence. Neither can act on that knowledge alone. The show's philosophical maturation parallels Rick's therapy journey. Early seasons presented therapy as weakness. Dr. Wong was a one-off character in a single episode. By season 7, Rick attends regularly. Air Force Wong shows him mid-session when the president calls with an emergency. Rick tries to leave. Dr. Wong asks if he needs to take the call. Rick admits the president, quote, "just wants to date you." The emergency isn't an emergency. Rick's therapy has become more important than his adventures. This represents the show's ultimate philosophical statement. Nothing matters cosmically, but things matter personally, and personal meaning is the only meaning that exists. Rick's adventures saving the universe don't give his life purpose. Therapy does. Fighting aliens doesn't matter. Relationships do. The universe is meaningless. That's liberating, not crushing, because it means you get to decide what has meaning. The show's journey from nothing matters, watch TV, to nothing matters, go to therapy, tracks the maturation of its philosophy. Early seasons use nihilism as comedy. The universe is random and cruel, so why not have fun? Middle seasons used nihilism as tragedy. The universe is random and cruel, so connection is futile. Late seasons use nihilism as foundation. The universe is random and cruel, so choose what matters to you and fight to protect it. Rick keeps Morty's photo in his wallet because Morty matters. Not because the universe says Morty should matter, because Rick chooses to care about Morty, despite knowing the universe doesn't care about anything. That's the only strength that exists in a meaningless cosmos, the strength to care anyway. But this philosophical maturity required confronting who was watching. But once the show finished reframing nihilism as a starting point for choosing meaning, it had to confront an uncomfortable reality. A huge part of its audience had never wanted that lesson in the first place. Section 11. Confronting the fanbase and the viewership question. Seasons 4 to 7's most controversial choices weren't creative mistakes. They were deliberate attempts to separate the show from its toxic fanbase by making Rick increasingly pathetic, vulnerable, and wrong. The 40% viewership drop wasn't a failure. It was a successful filtering of casual viewers who wanted Rick as a power fantasy from engaged viewers willing to watch him become a person. The show chose artistic integrity over audience size, proving that sometimes the measure of success isn't how many people watch, but whether the right people are watching. The smaller, more dedicated audience, 3 million Reddit subscribers, number 2 on Max worldwide, represents a victory, not a defeat. The McDonald's Szechuan sauce incident forced the show to confront what its fanbase had become. February 2018. Locations across America promised limited supplies of sauce to promote Season 3. Fans showed up in massive numbers. Supply ran out immediately. Fans threw tantrums, screaming at minimum wage workers, recording themselves having meltdowns, turning a promotional stunt into a national embarrassment. Videos went viral. The world watched Rick and Morty fans behave like entitled children over dipping sauce for chicken nuggets. The high IQ copy pasta emerged around the same time, originally a satire. To be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand Rick and Morty. The humor is extremely subtle, and without a solid grasp of theoretical physics, most of the jokes will go over a typical viewer's head. The copypasta mocked fans who treated watching an animated comedy as intellectual achievement. But satire collapsed into sincerity. Some fans genuinely believed watching Rick and Morty made them smarter. They missed that the show mocks pretension, including Rick's own. The cultural damage was immediate and severe. Admitting you watched Rick and Morty became socially hazardous. You had to add disclaimers. I watch it, but I'm not one of those fans. The sauce riot and high IQ meme transformed the show's reputation from brilliant sci-fi comedy to that show with the toxic fans. Viewership peaked during Season 3, averaging 2.51 million viewers, an 81% increase from Season 2. But the cultural perception had soured completely. Never Ricking Morty aired as Season 4, Episode 6, the show's most direct confrontation with its fanbase. Rick and Morty get trapped on a literal story train, a narrative device that runs on stories about Rick Sanchez. The train is populated by characters telling Rick stories. Some save Space Christmas because of Rick. Some want revenge on Rick. Some dated Rick. Everyone's life revolves around Rick Sanchez adventures. The train's villain, Story Lord, feeds on narrative potential, forcing Rick and Morty through increasingly meta layers of storytelling. The episode savages fan expectations relentlessly. When Rick and Morty try to escape through conventional action, Story Lord mocks them. Spiraling through the multiverse, burping semi-improvised dialogue about how nothing matters, so we may as well pull out our dicks and rub them on fate's glaring teeth. The line attacks the show's own formula while representing fans who want that formula codified and repeated forever. The climax features Rick and Morty accepting Jesus Christ as their personal savior. They pray together using evangelical language. Storylord screams, "This sucks! You guys would never do this!" That's exactly the point. The worst possible story, the one fans would hate most, breaks Storylord's power because it violates expectations so completely. Rick afterward. Nobody ever wanted to see that shit. The episode argues that predictability is death. Better to do something audiences hate than something they expect. The ending commercial mocks its own merchandising. Buy it ironically. Buy it sincerely. Just buy it. Not buying it is an act of buying it. The show calls out capitalism while profiting from it, acknowledges fan consumption patterns while encouraging consumption, operates on 5 layers of irony simultaneously. One fan later noted, "There's such a thing as going too meta." Valid criticism. The episode wasn't trying to be good traditional television. It was trying to be intellectually challenging anti-television. The viewership data tells a stark story. Season 3 averaged 2.51 million viewers. Season 4's premiere drew 2.33 million. By episode 4, that number dropped to 1.62 million, a 40% decline from Season 3's peak. Season 5's premiere recovered slightly to 1.9 million, but couldn't sustain it. The show was hemorrhaging audience. Casual viewers left, people who wanted easy entertainment departed. The Sauce Riot fans moved on. But something interesting happened with who stayed. Season 6 gained viewers among women aged 18 to 24, while losing young men. The demographic shift suggested the show was filtering out toxic fans, young men who idolized Rick's nihilism, while attracting viewers more interested in character development than power fantasy. The audience got smaller, but more engaged, more female, more willing to engage with difficult themes. Production gaps contributed to viewership decline. Season 3 ended October 2017. Season 4 premiered November 2019, over 2 years later. Season 4 split into two halves, with the second half airing May 2020. These gaps allowed cultural conversation to die down, momentum to dissipate, casual fans to forget the show existed. When episodes finally aired, they faced diminished expectations and reduced social media buzz. The show's response was to double down on everything toxic fans hated. Season 4 made Rick increasingly pathetic and vulnerable. The Old Man in the Seat showed Rick obsessed with protecting a secret toilet, revealed he programs AI to torture himself, demonstrated his loneliness through inability to share anything. Season 5 made Rick fail repeatedly. He couldn't find Rick Prime, couldn't prevent evil Morty's escape, couldn't protect his family. Season 6 stripped away the portal gun for an entire season, forcing Rick to deal with consequences rather than escaping them. Meanwhile, Beth and Summer got empowerment arcs that directly challenged Rick's dominance. Beth confronted her Space Beth clone, resolved their relationship through honest conversation, established boundaries with Rick. Summer became increasingly capable, often succeeding where Rick failed. The show systematically deconstructed the idea that Rick was the only competent person, that his intelligence justified his behavior, that power fantasy should override character development. The fan reaction split, predictably. Some viewers praised the character growth, the emotional depth, the willingness to make Rick vulnerable. Others complained the show had fallen off, that Rick wasn't cool anymore, that making him attend therapy and admit weakness ruined his character. The latter group was exactly who the show wanted to lose. They'd misunderstood the show from the beginning, treating Rick's nihilism as aspiration rather than pathology. The statistical evidence supports this filtering strategy. By Season 7, the show maintained 3 million Reddit subscribers, a massive engaged fan base for a show supposedly in decline. Max streaming data showed Rick and Morty as number 2 worldwide across 49 countries, mostly top 5 in each territory. These aren't numbers for a dying show. These are numbers for a show with intensely dedicated fans and strong international appeal. YouGov polling data revealed the complexity. 75% of Americans had heard of Rick and Morty, massive name recognition. But only 37% viewed it positively, while 16% actively disliked it. The show was famous, but divisive. The high negative perception likely stemmed from the toxic fanbase reputation. People knew about Rick and Morty and associated it with embarrassing fans, which made them less likely to give it a chance. The Sauce Riot's cultural damage persisted years later. The show addressed this reputation problem by making its toxicity explicit. Season 4's meta-commentary didn't just attack fan expectations, it attacked the kind of fan who made the Sauce Riot possible. The story train passengers obsessed with Rick Sanchez stories represent fans who can't engage with the show except through Rick. Storylord represents fans who believe stories must follow rules, that narrative conventions are sacred, that subversion is betrayal. When Rick and Morty escape by accepting Jesus, the episode makes a statement about artistic freedom. The show can do literally anything, even things that violate its core identity, because the alternative is creative death through repetition. Better to be occasionally terrible in new ways than consistently mediocre in familiar ones. The audience that stayed understood this. The audience that left wanted comfort food, not experimentation. The demographic shift toward women viewers is particularly significant. Early seasons attracted young men who identified with Rick, his intelligence, his power, his dismissiveness toward conventional morality. These viewers missed that Rick is a cautionary tale. When the show made that critique explicit through Dr. Wong's therapy scene, through Rick's increasing vulnerability, through the emphasis on emotional work over adventure, those viewers felt betrayed. They wanted Rick to stay invulnerable. The show wanted Rick to grow. Women viewers, statistically more interested in character-driven drama and emotional honesty, responded positively to Rick's growth arc. They were more willing to engage with episodes about therapy, about fear, about the complexity of relationships.
They weren't watching for power fantasy, they were watching for character development. The show's evolution toward character drama served them while alienating the power fantasy audience. This filtering process explains why the show's critical reception remained strong even as viewership declined. Season 7 scored 77% on Rotten Tomatoes, the lowest aggregate score, but based on fewer reviews rather than negative reception. Critics who engaged with the season praised its emotional depth, its narrative risks, its character work. The lower score came from fewer critics bothering to review it, which reflects reduced cultural penetration rather than reduced quality. The show's financial success continued despite viewership decline. Adult Swim renewed it through season 12 in 2024. The franchise value exceeded $100 million. Spin-offs launched: The Vindicators 2, Rick and Morty, the anime. Multiple international partnerships developed. These decisions require belief in long-term profitability. If the show was truly failing, Warner Brothers wouldn't commit to 5 more seasons. The viewership numbers tell one story, the business decisions tell another. The choice between audience size and artistic integrity isn't hypothetical. The show could have pivoted after Season 4's viewership drop. It could have gone back to Season 1 to 3's formula: episodic adventures, Rick as unstoppable genius, minimal character development, safe comedy. This would likely have recovered some lost viewers. The show chose not to. It committed to character growth, emotional honesty, challenging its audience, even when that meant smaller numbers. Season 5's Rick-dependent spray represents the risk of this approach. The sperm episode was terrible. It offered nothing philosophically, emotionally, or comedically beyond gross-out humor. It's the show at its worst. Meta-commentary without substance, concept without execution, shock value without purpose. The episode proved that creative freedom doesn't guarantee quality. Sometimes the show uses its freedom to make bad episodes. But the freedom itself remains valuable because it also enables great episodes like Fear No Mort and That's a Morte. The fan discourse around falling off centers on IMDb ratings. Seasons 1 through 3 maintained consistently high scores. Season 5 showed a visible dip. Fans point to this as objective proof of quality decline. But IMDb ratings measure popularity, not quality. They reflect how well something matches audience expectations. Season 5 failed to match expectations because it challenged them. The dip indicates the show changed, not that it worsened. Consider who left versus who stayed. Casual viewers, people who watched because it was popular, because friends recommended it, because it was funny sci-fi, left when production gaps reduced cultural presence and the show got weirder. Dedicated viewers, people invested in characters, willing to engage with difficult themes, interested in the show's philosophical journey, stayed and became more engaged. 3 million Reddit subscribers represents intense fandom, not casual viewership. The international streaming success particularly matters. American viewership declined. International viewership grew. The show became number 2 on Max worldwide across 49 countries. This suggests American-specific factors drove the decline. The sauce riot reputation, the high IQ meme, the toxic fandom association. International audiences without that cultural baggage engaged with the show differently, often more positively. The show's willingness to confront its own fan base through episodes like Never Ricking Morty and the Vat of Acid episode demonstrates rare courage. Most shows court their audiences, giving them what they want, afraid to alienate anyone. Rick and Morty spent Season 4 actively antagonizing viewers who expected certain things. This strategy drove away roughly 40% of the audience, but it also purified what remained. The viewers who stayed after being told their expectations were stupid, their favorite character was pathetic, their relationship to the show was being mocked, those viewers were truly dedicated. The question becomes, what's success? By traditional metrics, viewership numbers, cultural penetration, mainstream popularity, the show declined after Season 3.
By alternative metrics, critical respect, international appeal, franchise value, audience engagement, the show thrived. The choice between these definitions of success reveals what you value. Do you want a show millions watch casually, or a show millions fewer watch intensely? Rick and Morty chose the latter. It filtered its audience deliberately, sacrificing size for quality, breadth for depth. The result is a smaller but more engaged fan base, reduced cultural presence, but maintained critical respect. Fewer viewers, but more dedicated ones. This trade-off succeeded on its own terms. The show wanted to be taken seriously as character drama. It needed to lose the fans who only wanted memes and power fantasy. The 40% drop was the price of evolution. Which raises the final question: what comes next? The show also transformed how it engaged with its audience, forcing us to reconsider what success really means. Section 12. The conclusion. The rise. After the rise, knowing when to stop. So, did Rick and Morty really fall off? Looking at the evidence, the answer is clear: no. The show didn't decline, it evolved in ways that forced us to confront what we actually wanted from it. We've seen how seasons 1 through 3 established Rick as a nihilistic genius whose philosophy attracted both genuine fans and toxic imitators. We watched season 4 deliberately antagonize its audience through meta-commentary that called out fan entitlement. We tracked season 5's quality nadir as the show committed to uncomfortable truths about Rick's powerlessness. We witnessed season 6's quiet rebuilding through character-focused episodes that prioritized relationships over spectacle. And we analyzed season 7's creative renaissance, proving that the show could not only survive without its co-creator, but thrive by fully committing to character drama. These aren't the markers of a show in decline. These are the growing pains of a series that refused to calcify into formula, that chose artistic integrity over audience size, that valued long-term character development over short-term entertainment. The 40% viewership drop wasn't a failure. It was a successful filtering mechanism that separated viewers who wanted Rick as a power fantasy from those willing to watch him become a person. The philosophical journey matters most. Rick started as a walking embodiment of toxic nihilism, arguing that nothing matters, so why bother caring? The show spent 7 seasons systematically dismantling that philosophy, revealing it as depression disguised as enlightenment. By season 7, Morty articulated the mature position. Nothing matters cosmically, but things matter personally, and personal meaning is the only meaning that exists. This evolution from nothing matters, watch TV, to nothing matters, go to therapy, represents genuine philosophical growth that required the painful middle seasons to earn. The serialization paradox proved crucial. By refusing to commit fully to either episodic or serialized formats, the show maintained flexibility to tell any story while building genuine character arcs. The Rick Prime resolution mid-season wasn't wasted buildup. It was a statement that relationships matter more than revenge, that character growth trumps plot mechanics. The show used serialization as seasoning rather than structure, creating emotional moments that wouldn't work without years of context, while avoiding the continuity entanglements that doom long-running series. The Royland recasting became the ultimate test. If the show was built on voice acting and improvisation, it should have collapsed when its co-creator left. Instead, Season 7 demonstrated that the writing, the character foundation, the philosophical depth were strong enough to survive the loss of both title character voices. This wasn't just about replacing actors. It was about proving the show's identity existed independent of any single person. The more controlled performances actually enhanced emotional clarity, allowing character beats to land with precision rather than getting buried under burps and stammers. Most importantly, the show confronted its toxic fan base and won. The McDonald's sauce riot and high IQ copy pasta created cultural damage that threatened to define the show forever. Rather than courting those fans back, seasons 4 to 7 deliberately drove them away by making Rick increasingly pathetic, vulnerable, and wrong. The show chose to be smaller and better rather than larger and compromised. The result? A more engaged fan base, stronger critical reception, and maintained franchise value despite viewership decline. This analysis matters because it challenges how we measure artistic success. By traditional metrics, viewership numbers, cultural penetration, mainstream popularity, Rick and Morty declined after season 3. But those metrics only matter if you value breadth over depth, size over quality, immediate popularity over long-term legacy. The show chose differently.
It chose to be a character drama that happens to use science fiction rather than a sci-fi comedy with occasional character moments. It chose emotional honesty over consistent entertainment. It chose evolution over stagnation. The Simpsons question looms. With 70-plus episodes ordered and renewal through season 12, the show faces its defining challenge: ending before it becomes what it mocks. 7 seasons proved Rick and Morty can change, can risk, can alienate viewers and emerge stronger. But that same willingness to change becomes impossible to sustain across 120-plus episodes. Eventually, every character dynamic gets explored, every philosophical question addressed, every narrative possibility exhausted. The real test isn't whether Season 8 maintains quality, it's whether the show knows when to stop. Whether it values artistic legacy over corporate profits. Whether it believes its own philosophy enough to accept that nothing lasts forever, including itself. Rick keeps Morty's photo in his wallet because Morty matters to him, even though the universe doesn't care. The show needs to end because the story matters, even though Warner Brothers doesn't care. That's the lesson Rick and Morty has been teaching for 7 seasons. You create meaning by choosing what matters and protecting it, even when the universe gives you every excuse not to care. The show didn't fall off. It grew up. And whether it knows when to stop growing, when to choose the ending rather than letting entropy choose for you, will determine whether its legacy is an evolutionary masterpiece or cautionary tale. The rise after the rise is knowing when to stop rising. 7 seasons suggest the show understands. Whether it acts on that understanding remains the final question worth asking.